Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining to Airtime's Product Research Summit. My name is Moti Elkheim, and I'm going to be your MC for the event today. We have an unbelievable agenda, a list of panelists, thought leaders from the space of user research and product development. We're going to discuss topics like product adoption, continuous research, how to connect with your users, even in times where you don't have the budget to do so. Companies like Miro, AppsFlyer, Techstars, OpenWeb, Anywell, and more are joining us today in a day packed of full conversation. So what do we have for you on the agenda today? So today we're going to start with Airtime's CEO and founder, Kiss-Dozsai, who is going to discuss the myths of user research. Then we're going to move into the actual platform and show you how you can synthesize large amounts of data with Airtime. From there, we're going to dive into the first open panel discussion, and it's all about KYC, know your customers. We have unbelievable speakers there like Sharon, Nikki Anderson, Marcus Castenfors, and Andre Albuquerque. From there, we're going to start at 1 p.m. Eastern, how to do research fast and thorough. How can you quickly move your research in emerging companies, even when you don't have all the resources to do it? Customer adoption is next. How not to lose customer in 10 days. We have Jared Schreiber, Marcus Muller, and Lior Revivo, one of the foremost thinkers in user adoption. And the beautiful thing about all the panelists that we're having here today is that they had the experience of starting their session, their companies, all the way from the ground up with little resources to big budgets, and they're going to share that journey with you. So without further ado, let's start with the first session. Let me introduce to you Kiss-Dozsai, the founder of Airtime UX. Akos, the stage is yours.
Amazing, Moti. Thanks a lot for the introduction and welcome everyone. I still see like a number of people trickling in. We got to get started because all the panelists, they come on time, so we need to get there. And as a warm-up for the sessions and for the panels, I brought you a presentation on my own, and it's I named it "The Myths of User Research Before Product Market Fit." And the reason I gave this name is because I think like this user research is extremely valuable. But for that to thrive, you need users, you need to have access to users, and you need to be able to extract valuable insights. And especially in the early stages of companies like C stage or even Series A, you don't necessarily have the access to that vast amount of users that you can reach out to every now and then. So I think this is a topic that is relevant for me. It's relevant for so many product teams, over 400 product teams that I talked to in the last 2 years. So I want to share my learnings with you and what I saw. Now, let's kick off with who I am. I'm a product builder. I'm Akos. My background is Hungarian. I grew up in Hungary. Last 12 years, I've been living all abroad, all around the world. And I like to describe myself as a product leader and a product builder. I built in Germany in the last 8 years 5 different products. To give you an example, I built an investment platform where German retail investors could invest in beer-themed structured deposits. So these are deposits that yield a high interest rate if the share price of certain brewery companies develop in a positive way, which resonated pretty well with the German audience, which loves beer. Now, second thing you should know about me, I'm a learner. I love to learn new things. Just to give you 2 examples, I started to learn surfing 4 years ago. And now I also have a bet with my daughter that she started learning dancing and I started learning the guitar. And next summer, we want to perform together. I'm doing really bad. So on the side and after the summit, if there are any guitar talents here in the audience, please get in touch and help me out. The last point about myself is my father is a philosopher. I love arguing in a good sense. And this also means if you have any good points, if you have any questions, please ask it. There's a Q&A section, there's a chat section. If I don't have to cover them now in the presentation, then I promise to get back to you later. Now, let's start with why is it important to talk to customers in the early stage? I'm going to focus now on the early stage of the early stage companies. And I know this may sound a bit repetitive, but there's a lot of value in thinking through why do we actually have this wisdom from the great minds of product and user research that we should talk to users all the time. Now, the first point, and this is something that I also do. So everything that I do, I bring you here. This is how I live my life and how I talk to potential users or just people in product team. So you want to solve that, you want to validate that the problem that you're solving is an important one. And I brought you an example with my lock for my bicycle. Now, I hate it. Like the key doesn't fit, it's rusty, it's difficult to open it. And I have this problem every day, every single day. You have the frequency. I have it in the morning, I have it in the evening. And it would cost me 20 euros to buy a new one. In the last 3 years, I haven't bought it. Like, it is a problem, but I just wanted to give you this as an example. A problem may be frequent, it may be annoying, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to act on this. So whenever we think about our companies, what we want to make sure is that we don't end up solving a problem that is the lock for a bike, metaphorically. Now, the second point, and this one I really love, is about understanding available solutions. Like as a founder, I'm obsessed with Airtime. I love it, and I love to think about it. And it's easy to slip into this myopic view of the world that I have all these features and I solve all these problems for my customer, and not look at what else is on the shelf. What other solutions can my customers take? And for me, one of the good examples here, a situation that you want to avoid, is being a detergent, a washing powder. Now, the washing powder, it ticks the first problem. Nobody wants to walk around in smelly clothes, right? So we need washing powder. But then again, you go into a shop, you go into 7-Eleven or Tesco or whatever store you have in your country, all these detergents are next to each other, and there's no difference between them. And it's not just there's no difference, it's really easy to pick another one and not mine. So this is something that I always try to validate, and this is why I find it important to talk to customers to understand what solutions are they using today for the problem I want to solve. All right, let's move on. From these two, what you also want to validate is your value proposition. Is your product different enough from if you have a detergent? Let's stick to that example. Does this stick out somehow on the shelf, and will people pick that and prefer it because it's some of its features, some of its branding, or the community, whatever reason, emotional or rational they may have, will they pick it? And then the last point is just get better at talking to customers. I think it's one of the key skills that founders should have, PMs need to have, and it's a muscle. It's I had this phase last summer when I didn't talk to customers for about 6 weeks, and I realized it when I resumed. Like, my follow-up questions weren't as sharp. I wasn't as focused. I couldn't listen to the person and at the same time think of where to lead the conversation from there or what questions to ask. So to be expert and to be good at it and be a good like asker and listener, you got to practice and you got to do it. It's not enough to do it in like sprints. Now I do it to do a project and I do it for 2 weeks. All right, so we get this basics sorted out. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. The way I see it, there's a lot of like very valuable wisdom out there from Marty Kagan, from Y Combinator, and you can go to like any thought leader out there, they will tell you, you have to talk to customers. There's different benchmarks that they give. I happened to meet Marty a few weeks ago, I mean, maybe it was a month ago already. And in that workshop, he said, like a PM should talk a minimum of 3 hours every week with customers. YC will tell you there's nothing else you should do but focus on talking to clients and building your product. And I agree with both, like absolutely. But the question is, where do you get these people from? And if you do get people on the phone or on Zoom, how do you make sure you have good quality insights from there? Like I've encountered this a lot of times. It's not trivial. What's the best product experiment to deal with, to verify a certain problem or solution? Or how do you define the profile of the person you want to recruit and you want to talk to? How do you formulate questions in a non-biased and non-leading way? I think there's, like, once you get into it, there are so many of these small questions that require practice, requires user research skills and knowledge, and we don't necessarily have it. And on top of that, if you don't have like a tool with thousands of users, it's typically, especially in the B2B space, difficult to get a hold of users or potential users on an ongoing basis, and do this in an efficient way that it doesn't cost you hours and hours of work every week. So during the remainder of my presentation, there's going to be 2 more slides. I'd like to focus on what I heard from product teams, from the 400 product teams that I talked to in the last 2 years. What are the best practices that I saw from them, finding people and getting good quality insights, and share some of my like trial and errors and my learnings in this field. So what can you do to talk to more people and get more product feedback? This is something, create a mentor circle. Let's go step by step. Creating a mentor circle. What does this mean? When Marton and Marton is my technical co-founder, you're going to meet him shortly. When we came up, it wasn't even the idea of Airtime originally. We had other solutions in mind, and we went out to people and we asked them what they think, what they like. It was a very transactional way of getting feedback. And what I realized is that I was burning these relationships. A lot of people are really nice. They spend time on giving me feedback once, but I couldn't go back to them like 4 weeks later when we had a different iteration of that idea. So we were thinking, what can we do to change this transactional setup? And we came up with the idea to create a mentor circle. And the idea behind the mentor circle is that I didn't go out to product leaders and user research leaders to give me feedback for a particular, on a wireframe or an idea. But I told them, like, I'm focusing on this problem field X. And I'm bringing together the crème de la crème of the industry. I'm gonna get people, top user researchers from the US, from Europe, from Israel, from Australia, you name it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw in a few topics, a few ideas that I have, get your feedback around it, and at the same time facilitate the discussion among peers. And a mentor circle gives you a narrative that is all of a sudden not transactional. It can be repeated because it's not just you getting something from the mentors, but you giving them something in return. And what you give is a community. Now we go to the second point and call it the snowball. I think that's also the official term. Snowball means that you ask people who you talk to introduce you to others who are similar to them and who be willing to give you feedback. This is a very typical recruitment method when it comes to niche recruitment profiles, doctors, high net worth individuals, people who are typically difficult to get hold of. This works really well. I can also give you an anecdote here. A few months ago, I ran a podcast with my fellow Techstars founder, who has a startup focused on evaluating sites for solar panel developers. Okay, so he can tell you if a certain site is likely to succeed or not. And he had about 10 contacts, 10 people he could reach out to. He asked these people to introduce him to others. In total, in about 2 months, he talked to 60 people, only using this method. And I myself, I had a lot of inhibition initially to ask people. I thought, like, what's the incentive? Why would people introduce me to someone else? Maybe they're competitors. Why would they do that? But it does work. If you're working on solving an interesting problem that matters to them, it doesn't cost them anything to introduce you to another person that will allow you to get more product feedback and build that solution that is potentially interesting for them. So let's get to the third point, automating reach outs through LinkedIn. This is something that I've discovered recently. It works really well for me. Only with this point, I get 5 to 10 discovery calls every week. And the time investment I have with that is less than 30 minutes. And I'm not gonna, it's not a Ponzi scheme like pitch here, and it's not aloe vera that you can use for everything. But it was for me a very insightful journey to go through that. So I tell you what I do. I created a database of relevant people that I believe are my target audience and who, with a high likelihood, face the problem that I do. I use a tool to automate LinkedIn reach outs. So I updated this database of 2,000 people. And every day, this tool adds 20 people. And when I add people, I tell them, hey, I'm XYZ, and I'd love to share experiences about how you gather and analyze product feedback for product development. I'm not selling my product. This is not the purpose. These are anyhow discovery calls. And because I do this and I position it as I'm not like getting feedback from my product, but sharing experiences. And I do that like in every single call I go to. And when people tell me about their pain points, their processes, the tools that they use, I have all these 400 discussions I had in the past, and I can always get a couple of good examples and good practices that I can share back with them. It has nothing to do with Airtime. It typically they can implement it with their existing processes, and it gives a very good foundation to start discussing the topic and create a personal connection. So then we go to the fourth point, which is give first. This is, by the way, I have to say, in case there are any Techstars people here, it's plagiarism. Give first is Techstars' claim. This is what their hashtag is. And the philosophy behind that here in our case is that people are social beings, and if we get a favor from someone without expecting anything in return, the very natural human reaction is to return that favor. And counterintuitive as it sounds, I do a lot of favors and I don't even expect to get immediately something in return. But it mostly goes around. Like, people show up a couple of months later and maybe they introduce me to someone who could be interested in Airtime and give me feedback. Or maybe they come around the corner and say, hey, Akosha, it's the right time. I want to test it and I want to talk about it. So that's tell me, Moti, I'm going over.
And Akos, that's actually a pretty powerful insight. Sorry for kind of jumping in, because we have a really good question from the audience about one of the points you brought up, And that's from Julia. Julia, thank you for asking the question. And for all of our attendees today, if you have questions for all of the panelists throughout the sessions, feel free to plug them in the Q&A, or if you want to chat, you have the chat button at the bottom of your screen as well. So Juliet is asking, when you say asking for an introduction, does it mean asking them for a name and email to contact, or for them to actually go out of their way and introduce you to someone? How do you go about it to make sure you get that introduction?
So it depends. People are different in this respect. What I very often encounter is that people are, if we talked for the first time, people wouldn't necessarily give me the email address of their friends or their ex-work colleagues. What they ask me to do is share a short blurb. They pass it on to them, and then if the other person gives a thumbs up, then they connect us. There's also a tool called Bridge, which facilitates exactly this process. I think it's really smooth. Asking for an email, I think it's a bit pushy. I always ask them, okay, do you have someone in mind? If they say yes, then I just ask them, so what would be, what process would you feel comfortable with to get us connected? And they will prompt you, either give you the email address or tell you to send a blurb. It's one of the two, but I'd ask it as a question and not like, please give me the email, and then I'll just go back from there.
That makes sense. We have another one coming in. How do you get the right audience for a B2C company through the snowball method?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, how to get the right audience for B2C through snowball method.
Oh, okay. So my first thought for this is something that I do when I recruit in Slack groups for tests for Airtime. I write a description of who the ideal participant is. I say I'm looking for a person in a Series A company who uses Qualtrics and does 2 surveys a week. It shouldn't be like too long, like two or three criteria. And if you can describe that criteria in a couple of sentences and share it, there's a very good chance that people honestly self-select and suggest someone who suits those criteria. That's the first thought that I have. Let me take this with me. I really like the question, and I just want to make sure I also have a little time after the summit to think about it. If I have some additional like wisdom, let's not call it wisdom, thoughts or ideas to share.
Perfect. One more, Akos, because we're getting to the top of the session and we have more to come. So I want to make sure that we're covering everyone's questions that are coming in. And again, for anyone who wants to ask any question, please plug them in the Q&A. Akos, how would you apply this approach to a big organization that has a research team in-house and an ops team that as well? How would you apply that to a big organization?
Especially if there's a research ops team, which is in most cases taking care of the recruitment, I wouldn't bypass them. I would sit down with them, like discuss with them what your requirements are. If the person, I don't know the role of the person, but I'm just going to assume for the sake of the argument now that it's a product manager. Saying what your needs are, how many people you want to talk to, and then like come to a compromise. What is it that they do? What is it that you can also do to come up with that? I hope that's helpful. But I think it's in larger organization, you can also bump into the problem of strong sales teams, where sales teams don't, if the average contract value of the clients are high and they don't feel comfortable letting product people or researchers directly contacting the client. In that case, you have to sit down together. You can put these options on the table and discuss who does what and how to split.
Makes sense. We have another question from Kieran. That's actually an interesting one. All of them are, but this one is a bit different than what you covered so far. How do you get users to research with a demographic that you don't know the people that are a part of it? Meaning you're coming in with a product to market, you have an idea for a product, but you don't know the audience. How do you start going about getting the right audience in?
I assume that you still have a hypothesis. If you built a product, if you have a product, you must have a hypothesis of who, for whom it solves the problem. It may not be correct, but it's a starting point. It's something that you can do. And then, to be honest, this is also something that I did with Airtime. Let's just assume that I'm wrong about assume that the audience I was thinking of, it doesn't want my product. And then I just started thinking, okay, who else could use my product? Like, what other segmentation criteria can I think of? And just have a few exploratory discussions with those customer segments to get an idea of how relevant the problem is. And it also gives you a comparison. Like the more segments you talk, if you talk to people who really want your product and a segment who don't, you have this advantage that you can compare the fire in the eye, and you will recognize when someone really needs it.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. I think we can go on with the remainder of your slides, Akos. We have a couple of minutes left until the next session, so let's carry on.
I gotta make it quick. Thanks so much for the questions. So this is the last slide. I don't have time now to go through everything, but the points here of what you can do to get high quality product feedback. Prepare for sessions. Preparing for sessions means that whenever I talk to someone, I look at their LinkedIn, I look at connection points. These are good icebreakers. Every time it costs me 2 or 3 minutes, but the value of the discussion, the rapport I can build with people, it pays off so much more. So do that. I work a lot with mentors. I have my blind spots as well. Among the panelists, I have some mentors who give me feedback and guide me. And the last point is just do it. And this is like the final thing. You have to do it over and over again, and you're going to get better at it. And I'm going to leave you with a short story here. I'm going to try to squeeze it in a minute. And this story is about my daughter. Okay, so she's 4 years old. Every night, there's a routine how she goes to bed and falls asleep. We have dinner together. Then she takes a bath. Then I read 2 bedtime stories. Then I sing 5 sing-along songs. And then she falls asleep. Okay, so that's the rhythm. Every day she tries to throw me out of this rhythm and try to find time for herself to play. 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, 301. She comes to me and she says, "Dad, I brought you your book. Why don't you read a little bit, and then I have 10 minutes to play." And you know, by testing and doing all over again, after a while she found a way, the crack in the wall, because I love reading literature, and I never have time for it. And then I said, okay, yeah, fine, you play, I read. And the reason I wanted to say this story is because kids learn by repeating the same thing thousands of times or hundreds of times. And this is how we learn as adults as well. It's just we typically don't have the luxury of doing it. But try to just do it, and I can promise you, the more you do it, and the more frequently, the better you get at asking relevant questions. You better get follow-up questions and finding insights. And with that, I make a cut. And thanks so much for listening to me. Thanks so much for the questions. Awesome audience. And now we need to move to the next section.
Akos, thank you so much. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed the session. And by the way, for anyone in the audience who would like to reach out to Akos or to Martin after the following session, you have the contact email in the chat. So feel free to copy that email, reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to share more of our insights and more of the platform. You can email us at info@airtimeux.com. So Akos spoke about the myths of user research and what you need to do in order to really get it done. At the bottom of it, you have to do it. Even if you don't know your customers, if you do know your customers, you're not going to get data unless you're going to start engaging and pulling that data toward you. Now, the question is, what do you do when you get lots of data? Huge amounts of data. Now you have the challenge that most users, research teams and product research teams or research operations are dealing with. How to synthesize the data in a way that it's easy to digest, actionable, and allows you to move fast. And for that, I'm going to bring Martin, the co-founder and CTO of Airtime, and he's going to show us how to synthesize data and get the insights that we need right from the start. So Akos, thank you for your session. We'll see you throughout the event as you're going to moderate the panels.
I'm gonna stay here with Martin.
Oh, you're going to stay here with Martin? Even better.
We're gonna do a duet.
Let's do a duet. Martin, welcome to the event.
Hey, Moti. Hey, Akash. Hey, everyone. Yeah, let's not chase away Akash just yet. I think he has a few good things to say for this session as well. So hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Martin. I'm the CTO and co-founder here at Airtime. I'm a Hungarian based in Hungary, where I live and lead our product design and engineering teams. For the past 10 years, I've spent my career in different product roles trying to figure out better and better ways to get feedback from users and then making sense of all that feedback.
Thanks a lot.
Let's start looking into how we can do that with Airtime.
Yes. So the topic that we brought to you is how to synthesize large volume of product feedback efficiently. And when I say this, I'm thinking of two particular examples or two particular problems to unpack it. Problem number one is that it's difficult, as I was also alluding to that in my presentation, it's difficult to get feedback from people. If you're using surveys, you must have encountered survey fatigue. It's not easy to get people to respond to surveys. And if you're organizing interviews and you want to get product feedback from them, a lot of users just don't show up. Like in Series A stage companies, there are so many anecdotes that I came across where the no-show rate is up to 50 or 70%. Now this is aggravating, it's time wasting, but at the same time, it hinders you to move faster with your product. And the second part of the problem is that if you do have the interviews and survey responses, it's very time consuming to go through them and process them. And when you think about how fast product teams need to make decisions, even on a daily basis, you typically don't have the luxury to spend too much time on analyzing. So we're going to focus on this. And I brought you a little story. And we're going to walk you through this story. This is the story with Airtime. I'm going to use our company as an example. It's a semi-fictional story with fictional data. I hope you're still with me. And the way the story starts is that Airtime, this is true, we released our first MVP, first self-service version of the product end of September, right? With every SaaS product, we're interested and we're obsessed to understand what is the onboarding experience. What is it that people encounter as friction points? And what could we do better to make sure that more people convert? And then whoever converted becomes an active customer. So for this, what we do is what we use is something that is called micro surveys. And before I move on, I want to pass back the mic to Martin to tell us what micro surveys are and what they're good for.
All right, so micro surveys are really simple. They're basically a frictionless way for you to collect feedback about user experience at different points of the user journey. In the example that we are going to show you now with Akash, we have set up a very simple customer satisfaction score survey that is followed by a free text answer where people can give you the reason for the customer satisfaction score that they gave you. We then decided to show this survey to users after they have completed the onboarding journey in Airtime. And then Akash can show you the results that we get out of it.
Exactly. So because the processing is a nagging pain point, What we did, we collected 27 responses through these micro surveys. And what I find in Airtime automatically analyzes the feedback responses, clusters them into positive feedback and pain points, and it does this in a rolling basis. So as I'm getting newer and newer feedback, all these pain points and positive feedback points are going to get updated. And this is an extremely efficient way to understand what do I need to focus on. And from this fictional example, the data here is fictional. Let's just pick, all I noticed, there are integration challenges. It's one of the things that hinders people. Now, remember, these are answers that I got from people who converted. But still, if they encounter this problem, this is a very good proxy for me to say that that other people who didn't convert also have this problem. And from here, what we then did, because both of us are Hungarians, when we said, okay, I want to do this, we have some Hungarian users and we want to get their feedback too. So we threw out another survey at them. And we threw out this survey to this Hungarian audience. And what we got were Hungarian answers. Now, I don't see your faces. I don't know how many of you are Hungarian and understand this. If you're not, you have to take my word that these are legible and meaningful sentences, and it's in Hungarian. And what happens is that in Airtime, I got the summaries of the key pain points and everything of these Hungarian answers in Hungarian. I got to give some caveat here. This is an exploratory feature. We're also experimenting with it. The focus that we have with Airtime is in English, but I dare you to try it in your native languages and see what you get, and come back to us and tell us your experiences. Now, moving from here, let's just back up a little bit because we jumped so deep into microsurveys. Martin gave a little bit of overview of what microsurveys are, but I think it's meaningful to cover that again. So I'm just going to hand back the mic to you, Martin, again.
Yeah, so let's zoom out a little bit and look into what a microsurvey actually is. And for a bit of background story for that, at Airtime, we talked about 15 product teams every week. And what we have seen is all of these product teams working on digital products have the same recurring questions and problems that they want to solve. Why do my users churn? How do I get more users to convert from the free tier to the paid package? Or who are my key users anyway? And what we have also seen is that most of the product teams who are successful in getting useful and insightful answers to these questions use the same methodologies and same questions. So what we did in Airtime is just we took the best practices from these product teams and built a series of templates that are meant to investigate these specific problems. Literally, to get started in Airtime, all you need to do is pick one of the templates, and then it comes with a preset methodology and questions. What you can do also is to customize these questions if you want to fine-tune them a little bit, and also add the follow-up step to invite people who responded to your surveys, to your microsurveys, to interviews. And the logic here is that we start with a very, very simple question where people just have to click a smiley and give you their thoughts about how much they liked a certain user experience. And then if they were willing to do that, we asked them to explain this in a free text input, like, hey, why did you give that score? Which takes a bit more effort from them. If they're also willing to do that, then we'll also ask them that, hey, do you want to elaborate further? And are you willing to join us for a 30-minute interview where we can dig deeper? And by doing this gradually, going from low friction to the higher friction, what we have seen is that we get a lot better engagement and also a lot better show-up rate for eventually to the interviews. And this way you can explore the problem from a very simple input to details in user interviews. In the next step, you can configure a few simple details about the survey. The most important one would be targeting. So what type of users would you want to capture? And a very simple way to do that is just to do it based on a URL. So for example, if you are curious about the problem, like how could you get more people to upgrade from your free package to your paid tier? then you can just target your pricing page based on the URL and capture people who are already there and thinking about upgrading. And then the last few settings are just details about when and how to show these microservices. Just absolutely make sure that you don't spam your users when you don't want to.
All right, let's move back out. Thanks a lot, Marton. Okay, so we ran this survey. We got some feedback. We identified some pain points. And okay, so I know, like, integration challenges, analytics, limited customization. What do you do with that? You have to explore it with customers. So what we decided to do is to get in touch with 5 customers and talk to them each for 15 minutes. And I'm going to show you what happened is we took the recordings, and then what you do is you take the recordings, you throw it in Airtime, and Airtime gives you 2 things. First, it gives you a beautified transcript. What a beautified transcript means, if you ever worked with a raw transcript, you know that people talk in long sentences, grammatically incorrect sentences. Like, I talk in long sentences. If you're on the spot, you tend to inflate the sentences that you use. Now, that's one thing. And the second thing, because of all the fill words, it's difficult to skim through that and find the really relevant quotes and statements of your customers. So we keep all the points and all the meaning, but turn the sentences into readable, easily readable and grammatically correct format. This is step number 1. And in step number 2 comes the funky part. I can go and take my questions. Something I asked in the interviews is, how would you describe your onboarding experience? And then what I get back from Airtime, what Airtime actually does is that it goes into the recordings, it looks at the remarks of people that relate to the question, looks if there's a dominant opinion here, and returns the key learnings in form of a short paragraph, and gives me some sources for that. So I can have some context of where these insights come from. And in this case, I see all the positive stuff, like that the onboarding was intuitive, so on and so forth. But I then see, okay, what was a bit tricky is to find the sign up button and the pricing packages. Now I have something more concrete that I can look into and start fixing. And because we have 2 minutes to go until the next panel starts, I want to zoom out here a little bit again and pass the mic back to Marton to tell us a bit about the 2 types of insight extraction methods that we're using.
Before Martin goes on, if I may, so Ákos, if I understand you correctly, and it's coming from the audience, you have the ability to take these enormous amounts of data and just convert them into an easily readable paragraph that gives you the highlight, most repeated, trendiest issues, either positive or negative, so the product and research team can act on very quickly.
Precisely. And this recording can come from sales. It doesn't have to be just user research recordings, any type of customer interaction.
Got it. Very well. Okay. To all of our panelists joining, we're going to start the next session in a couple of minutes. We're going to give it back to Martin. We have a couple of questions from the audience that we would like to address before. So thank you for our panelists for being a bit patient with us. 2 more minutes, we'll start. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so just for closing thoughts and just to summarize what we have seen is basically the 2 types of analysis that Airtime offers. One of them you have seen with the microsurveys, which we call a clustering type analysis. That means you don't really have to know in advance the patterns you are looking for and the questions you want to answer. You can just look at the data set and say what are the most frequent, or learn what are the most frequent things people are saying without prompting it at all. And what you see on screen now, what we have used for interviews, but you can also use this to search across multiple different data sources like sales calls or customer support discussions. This is when you know what you're looking for. You organize the research projects, you wanted to learn about specific topics. Maybe you're entering a new market and want to learn about people's preferences there. And you can ask the questions in human language. And we can go through all of that data set and return you the answers and also the references, like who said what, when, and on what channel, which made us come to the conclusion that we came to at our time. So these are the two analysis methods, clustering and query-based analysis.
Very cool. A couple of questions that came up. We're going to ask them before we start the next session. How easy it is to integrate the nudge?
Oh, so it integrates the same way as Google Analytics or any kind of high-level tool would integrate into your product. It takes about 3 minutes to do and doesn't require any developer involvement.
And Martin, how do you integrate the microservice into the product flows, or is it offline?
That's the one I answered. So it's the same way as Google Analytics, 3 minutes, no development effort. I think the other one is about how to achieve good results, which we have very detailed answers to, but we're already 2 minutes over time, so I'll just answer that in text.
Perfect. And as I said before, if you have any questions to Martin or Ákos, you have their email in the chat. You can reach out to us at info@airtimeux.com. And without further ado, we're going to start with our first panel of the day. We have a list of superstars coming in for this one. Know your customers, how to stay on top of customer needs. We have Sharon, Nikki Anderson, Marcus Castefanos, and Andre Albuquerque. Ákos is going to moderate the event. He's going to introduce them. It's going to be a powerful discussion. Tune in.
Sweet. Thanks a lot. It's so good to have the four of you on in the same call. Amazing. Thanks so much. Before we jump into the discussion, I wanted to share one thing with the audience straight away. Some of our panelists are located in Israel. They decided to join for subsequent sessions. Maybe if circumstances don't allow, they have to drop out unexpectedly. So if like a panelist was here, but then they're gone, don't worry. With all likelihood, they're safe. But there's something more important that they have to take care of. And on that note, also my big thanks and heart going out to all these panelists for making it today. I can't imagine the hardship and the shock that they've been through, and it's amazing resilience from their side to still join us and share their thoughts. So this is something that I wanted to share with the audience, and with that, let's jump into our panel, which is about knowing your customer, how to stay on top of customer needs. And the first topic that I wanted to throw in, and I want to throw the first question. Oh, maybe rule of engagement. I have a few questions in mind. I'm gonna throw it at different people. All of you are gonna get some, but once you answer, the others feel free to reflect and to jump in. I'd love to have a vivid discussion. And yes, so the first topic is that there's a lot of talk about knowing what your users want and uncovering their preferences. But it's also vast. There are so many things that a product team could research, and I was just thinking, what your thoughts are. What is it that they must research and must know about their customers? And the first question I'd like to pass to Nikki.
Cool, thanks. Hey, this is actually a really great question, and I'm very happy you passed it over to me. So something that is very important for me is high impact research. So making sure that you are doing research that is the most impactful that you can do for your team and for your organization, because I know that also means we have limited customers, limited number of participants that we can sometimes reach out to, and we want to make sure that we're reaching out to them for the most important research, especially when it is that limited customer base. So what I like to do with my product teams is to sit down and do a question gathering workshop that really highlights the big questions that we have as an organization, or the super big gaps in our knowledge. So where is the assumption that we have, and where is that gap where we're just we really don't know what the answer to this is, or we're really leaning too heavily on assumptions to create something in particular. So I really like to do that question gathering, and then I also ask, where are we really stuck? where do we need information in order to make decisions and move forward? So it's kind of how I think about it, is really looking across different teams to bring together those questions, and then finding the questions that overlap multiple teams, because those would be the highest impact kind of questions to answer.
Amazing. Any of you guys want to build on that?
Sure. I'll first say, thank you for having me. I'll say that I agree 100% with Nikki. I'll just add, your job as a researcher is to kind of be in the lookout for these questions. So it could be a workshop. It could be kind of just sharpening your eyes and ears for all kinds of meetings and gatherings. Look for questions. Sometimes it's going to be easy. People just ask questions out loud. But in many cases, it's not going to be that easy. Sometimes it's maybe a conflict between two people or two teams, and there's a question coming out of that, and then research can help with that. Maybe it's a big dilemma a team or teams have, and so on. So constantly kind of opening your ears mostly for these questions.
I can jump in to add a little bit of another angle to it. I mean, the key thing in product development is to maximize value and minimize risk. So minimizing risk is to build the wrong thing, right? So that is really important to kind of. Nikki, you talked about a brainstorming session relating to questions that we have as a team. That's excellent, right? But maybe we could have a brainstorming session. What could go wrong in terms of the product that we intend to build, right? So that is a tactic or technique that I typically recommend to teams as well.
Yeah, there's a game, isn't there? There's a workshop game where you can do that, all the things that could go wrong with this particular idea. And I think it's
a pre-mortem.
Yeah, it's super, super smart.
I just can you hear me well?
Yes.
Sounds good. Yeah, I just wanted to add a really common thing is also the perception of the risks beyond the pre-mortem, talking about how are customers, people used to solving the problem we're trying to solve. Because often the way they're trying to solve the problem, it doesn't look like the way we're trying to solve their problem. Sometimes we're competing with stuff that's so completely different. It's like saying that VR competes with Netflix, and they're completely different mediums and setups and environments. And if you're just saying, oh, a VR company is trying to do research against customers of other VR companies, it's ignoring who you're actually competing. So I think that research should take into consideration, and often that consideration comes from both going out and talking with customers and seeing how they're engaging with the problem space, but also internally on how we believe the problem space should look like and how we can increase the range. I think including that within the discovery is something really good.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Andre. Since you can stay unmute, I have the next question for you. You're a product leader, VP product. You built a number of product teams, big organizations, and I was just wondering, there's product teams, they're constantly juggling, right, with their time, and they have to make calls, and chances are they don't have the manpower to research everything. So how should they approach this? On the one hand, let's stick with Nikki's example of identifying all these questions and hypotheses that needs to be researched, and when that meets the actual manpower and budget that the team has.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Number one, I'm a big fan of creating product first teams. What that means is that you don't have siloed skills. You don't have software developers. You don't have product owners. You don't have researchers. You have product researchers, product engineers, product managers. I think they should be product first. And a big part of product is research, is asking the right questions, getting to enough answers. It's formulating great hypotheses. And a great way to overcome the lack of resources or people to tackle this is to actually equip everyone to be able to be a researcher first, to be a product person first and to tackle their own problem space, whether that problem space is scoping or prioritizing or deciding on architecture or deciding on delivery. Like, you can be a researcher on your area, ask great questions, formulate great hypotheses, go around what the solution space should actually look like. So I think when we implement this kind of setup, which is a mindset, right? Like I'm a big, I don't know what's the opposite of a fanboy, but like I hate the product owner role, PO, because I believe everyone in the product team should be a product owner. It means owning the product. It means owning the result and the effectiveness of the problem. Then you are whatever you are within the team of product. And I think research is a core part of product. And if everyone puts that hat of a researcher, you can very easily overcome the problem of lacking resources to run research.
Very good points, and I think Marcus, we both heard from Marty Kagan how he hates the role of product owners, and he also gave like a similar explanation for that. Do any of you have anything to reflect on that, maybe or a story to add?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo what Andre talked about, just to do research as a team, to just spread that intelligence in the team and to equip more people to do research. But I think, what's really important is that you also have to build deep skills to do research, right? There's an art to asking the right question. So it's also important that you have a person on the team who has that deep skill as well. So it's a kind of a trap that I've seen in some teams, that you just you rely on the entire team to do research.
I definitely echo the team sport. It shouldn't be done just by one person necessarily or gated. That's the last thing that a team needs, is more silos. So I completely agree. I as a user researcher, I obviously have seen and felt tough feelings with regards to democratization and with teaching others user research. But I have found that there are people at organizations, whether it be product owners or devs or marketing or designers or whomever, and when they are super interested in honing those skills and really flexing those muscles, and it's not like, we do one research project and then they don't speak to users for another 6 months, so they forget all of the skills. I'm totally all for that. I will also say, like, not everything should be researched. Like, we don't need to research everything. There's a lot of other methodologies out there that are much better suited, especially than qualitative user research, to find answers to problems or questions. Because I've seen teams kind of get stuck being like, okay, like let's test this one very small thing. And I'm like, yeah, my sample size of 7 people for this particular usability test isn't going to give us what we need to feel confident for this decision. So yeah, I think it's also being very mindful of what you are researching and making sure that it makes sense to research it.
Can I add one more thing? I think you're talking about, you asked about juggling time and deciding what research to do. I think generally speaking, the key word there is impact. If you feel either yourself or getting hints from the team that the thing you're approaching towards kind of with research is not something you're going to do something about, then there's no point. That said, your team might think that a very minor usability test is the most important thing in the world to do now, while it's not necessarily that. And maybe they can do that on their own. I would, as a rule of thumb, my opinion, I would highly prioritize more discovery research and generative research rather than tactical research. So if there's a problem with juggling time and deciding what to do research on, that's how I act, at least.
It's a very good point. And in one of the webinars I had, I think it was about mixed method research, my guest brought up Janet Fucella's name, who wrote an article on prioritizing user research. I don't know if you're acquainted with that, but she has this matrix where she looks at like problem clarity and risk, and then has 4 quadrants to decide what you need to design, or sorry, what you need to research, what you don't need to research, what you can like take as a risk. Do you have any thoughts? This is like every 2x2 matrix is a very simplified view of the world. But do you have like your 2 cents on this approach to prioritize?
I think it's a conversation between you, the researcher, and the team, or if there's no researcher, then conversation in the team. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of frameworks and like templates and 2x2s, you know, but I feel as though sometimes what can happen is we can take stuff, at least this is what I did as a user researcher when I was starting. I started at a teeny tiny startup that had never done research, that was B2B, and I tried to steal and copy and paste like IDEO's like design research process, and it just crashed and burned because it didn't work within the context of the organization. So I think that we can use these things as inspiration for us to bring to our teams and see what fits and what doesn't, rather than always trying to just take what is 100% there already. I think that these frameworks can serve as really, really great inspiration for starting the conversations, but will probably need to be tailored and personalized to the actual environment and context in which the people are working.
If I can pitch in, I think frameworks and processes, in the end of the day, they exist to create harmony in a chaotic environment. And I think people forget to assess whether there is indeed chaos or not. And sometimes they jump straight to a framework, straight to a template, straight to a way that others said this works. And sometimes you're not actually solving for any chaos. Sometimes you're just working on a blank canvas, fully unencumbered, fully autonomous, fully capable of thinking through some first principles, which I know it's an expression that is tingling, but like often sometimes people should use those frameworks and templates to kind of get an idea direction, but then they should assess how much should I actually use of this? How much harmony do I need to create? It's the same thing that I think Nikki said, like not everything needs to be researched. And I think one of the areas that rarely frameworks talk about is gut, it's conviction, right? Because it's not like you can't mathematically understand the level of conviction of gut. But sometimes when there's high conviction and there's an easy path to build something and ship something, and often a cheap path, there's nothing like putting something live in production in front of the user and the customer and having them either take out their credit card or not, rather than saying, oh, I would use this, or ideally you don't ask future questions, you ask past questions. But there's nothing like live, there's nothing like production. And if you have a high conviction, cheap enough app to test like that, there's many of the things that Nikki said, like you don't need to research, and you can act like this. Everything else, I mean, it's a balance, right? I think if there's chaos, framework away, process it away. Otherwise, like iterate on the velocity of the team to make decisions, to ship, to build, to test, and prove hypotheses. I think if you go that way, often you can get quite a big dose of balanced research within the process.
Yeah, I mean the simplest framework is to just balance things, right? So you have your intuition of what to build, right, in your team, and then you have user research, and then you have looking at data, and then you're talking to stakeholders. So if you expose yourself to different data sources, you will have a more nuanced picture, and you will have a better gut feeling of what to build. So that is mixed methods in my head to kind of, exposing yourself to more data.
Cool, thank you. Tomer, you've been user research leader in a number of renowned companies, and I want to throw the next topic at you, and it's a bit ungrateful to get this, but it's nothing personal. But I think you're a good starting point for this. So a lot of times I hear when I talk about user research is the return on investment. How do you quantify the ROI of research? And I think there are like 2 hypotheses: is that one, you can measure the cost, And then you can estimate the reward, because from the combination of the two, you can come up with an ROI. And I was just wondering in what context you encountered this sort of argument to justify user research through an ROI. And the second sub-question here, is this actually the right way to justify why we do research?
Sorry, I don't play that game. I don't need to justify myself to anyone. Last time I did anything related to justifying or checking or evaluating ROI of research was maybe 15 years ago. And I don't have any intention to do that. There are enough companies and organizations that understand it. I don't see anybody else justifying themselves on a team, so I don't think researchers should.
Do you mind if I reframe a bit the question? Because I do want your question on one thing. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So this is a situation that kind of happened to me, and I'm a startup guy. I'm like 0 to 1 most of my life, and often with CEOs on 0 to 1, velocity and ship it and let's build it and why waste time and why are we taking so long is a common denominator, right? And I'm a big fan of research, especially as you go from 0 to 1. The part of talking with customers is extremely important. Like if you build things in the comfort of your 4 walls, the likelihood is that you fail. So the question I have is like, how would you face a CEO that it's not like he or she's saying, I don't believe in research, but he or she's saying is, I know what we need to build. We just need to go fast because there's a pressure of funding or there's a pressure of getting this. It convinced me why we should go a bit slower to do the things that you believe are right. I'd put it like this. It's not justifying, it's convincing. I don't know if this makes it easier to...
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe anything is right. I mean, I think there's no right or wrong. I just don't feel I don't feel that this discipline should be in a position where it kind of needs to persuade anyone or justify anything. I think that I wouldn't even find myself, now that I'm kind of older and wiser, I hope, I don't choose to work in these companies where people ask me to be persuaded, because they don't need me to be persuaded. Their users will persuade them very harshly, very quickly. And eventually those companies, we've all been there. If they ignore research, suddenly one day they don't use the word research. They use these terms that I hate so much. Talking with customers, collecting feedback. This is not research. Because talking with customers sounds like anybody can do it. And then if you want to do something more, then you need to persuade. I don't need to persuade anyone. You don't know why your customers are signing up and then not using your product? I wonder. Maybe a meeting with 15 people on Latte will solve that. I don't need to persuade anyone about anything. Let's be positive. More and more companies understand it these days. Not enough, I agree, but more and more understand it. Unfortunately, in the past year, there was a lot of layoffs across companies. I don't have internal information about kind of whether this was an intentional decision to get rid of researchers, but not only researchers, but a lot of researchers were laid off. But I've seen very strange things in the past year where companies lay off tons of researchers, and then you begin to find research positions available in the same companies. I wonder why.
Nikki, do you have a take on this topic?
Yeah, I spent a lot of my career convincing and justifying, and I wish that I hadn't. But unfortunately, I was in positions where I felt as though there wasn't much of a choice. And I was often the first and only user researcher, right? And I was kind of like, well, why did you hire me? that was a bit of a question mark. That was a bit confusing. But oftentimes what I found is people will engage with me and they will say, oh, we have a problem, right? We have a problem, like people are dropping off, like our retention rate sucks, or our conversion rate has gone down, or something's wrong, right? And then I will say, oh, let's understand it better, right? And then suddenly that's too slow. And I'm like, well, you have a problem. So I get a bit of whiplash sometimes with this kind of question. But ultimately, there's a lot of user researchers who are in positions in which they're having to justify their work day to day. It's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully it's going to go away. Hopefully it's going to get better. And more people are understanding the value of user research. But what I do try and say to them is if you're struggling with this particular problem, like try to make sure that you're getting in there with the most impactful like the impactful research, so that you can, I try not to say prove the value of user research, but demonstrate the value of user research to your colleagues by making sure that you are getting in there and doing the most impactful stuff that you can be doing. But I must admit, as somebody who for about 8 years hit my head against the justification wall, it hurt quite a lot. So I echo lots of sentiments.
I can add one story that I've used in the past. It's the $300 million button. Have you heard that story? It's an old story, but a good story. It's from Jared Spool, who did research for, I think, Macy's, one of the e-commerce sites in the US. And what they discovered was a massive usability issue. So people didn't want to create an account, like a username, a password, that kind of stuff. They just wanted to check out as guests. So that was a key insight from the research. And then they did some changes to the checkout flow. So you could check out as a guest. And then they saw revenue of $300 million because of that. So conversion rate went up, right? So that story could be good for stakeholders. Like $300 million, it's pretty good. And that was in 1 year, I think, or something crazy like that. So if you Google the $300 million button, then you have that story.
That's a good story. And Marcus, let's stick with you. I am going to throw in a last question for this round, and then we'll take some questions from the audience as well. Make sure we have some a conversation here. And I'd like to focus a little bit on the continuous aspect of research. And just in general, give us your thoughts why you think it's important to stay on top of user needs all the time. And the question in brackets is how often do actually user needs change that necessitates to stay on top of them?
So let's tackle the first aspect. So continuous. I mean, this is a muscle that you need to build. And I can tell you a story. So I worked for a financial institution. I was head of design for quite a few years, and then built up a design team, and we had 2 user researchers. And what we did was we got this continuous muscle to work. So we set up user Fridays. So every 2 weeks we had users coming in, and we did evaluative research and also generative research. So we didn't have a set agenda. So we tested prototypes that were created by the design team at the time, or we wanted to hone in on specific problems or needs relating to users. So that is a recommendation, to just have that in the calendar. So every 2 weeks you have 3 interviews for, 45 minutes, and then you have that muscle going. Right. And then you could ask a question by the end of the interview. Okay, so could you recommend a person we could talk to as well? So you start to build out a panel of customers to interview. So that's a technique as well. And then regarding your question about needs changing. So so that is a philosophical question. What do you define as a need, right? And there are some basic human needs, right? And then you could
I just wanted to be a bit provocative. I'm continuous research, but I'm interested in how you're thinking about why the values of continuous research.
I mean, absolutely, 100%. I mean, you need to have this muscle going, working all the time, and then to gather insights and to work both with evaluative and generative research. So I can end there. And then other smart people can jump in with their thoughts.
So I'm happy to pitch in here. I think on the continuous side, on the need change, I don't think people often realize that, like, the concept of product market fit, or the way I try to kind of consider market, is some of the people with a problem times the willingness to pay to solve that problem. You might have a problem that if you are not willing to pay, it's a worthless market, right? But the thing is, the willingness changes over time. What was delightful and generated a lot of willingness to pay suddenly becomes expected or commoditized, and suddenly that sole thing is no longer driving willingness to pay. So suddenly you might continue having the problem, but what you're offering is no longer triggering that willingness to pay. So the continuous discovery of, like, okay, what is the next thing that can sustain that willingness to pay to be as high as it was, so that I can keep converting, I keep growing, I can keep satisfaction, I can keep retention. So I'd say, like, if I had to explain from a point of, like, this is why that continuous discovery matters. This is why every team needs to continuously do this. This is why we shouldn't, like, expect the glory time when we crack something, or when we nail the niche, is this. Like, you're commoditizing. Your success commoditizes the reason why you were successful. So this is kind of how I try to see it from a product standpoint.
I just want to add something about needs. Needs don't change much. On one hand. On the other hand, our interests as a team change all the time, and that's okay. But I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe, if you study the needs of salespeople, whatever. I'm not being very specific here.
To make money.
Yeah, but their needs in trying to do that. But what they need. If you do that research study today, and you get answers to that question, you don't need to do that a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, or 4 years from now. It's not going to change much, if at all. So the important thing is to first expose and understand those needs, and understand how, the difference between what we're interested in and what users really need. That said, in terms of continuous research, if you do continuous research, and I would argue continuous research should happen every day, then you can have your, let's say, permanent questions that you ask, but then based on the interests of the team, you can add to that. So let's say you always ask the same 3 questions, whatever, and suddenly the team is interested in something, in a 4th question, in an answer to a 4th question. Add that for 2 weeks, and you collect enough information to get an answer to that, and move on to the next thing the team is interested in. But again, generally speaking, needs don't change much. Doesn't mean that you're done once you do the research, but because there are always other domains that you might not have investigated.
Thank you. And Nikki, that leaves you with the final words.
I'll try and concise and intelligent sounding. So while I agree with continuous research and I'm all for it, please just make sure that you have goals for the research, and please just make sure that it doesn't become casual chats with customers that then don't end with anything like synthesis or no note taking or no recording. So if you're going to do continuous research, like, to put the rigor in the continuous research, because it can get easy to kind of let that go if you're doing it so often. So if you're going to do it, put the rigor in, put the goals in, put the intention for the research in, and then hopefully you're golden.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to all of you. Really insightful, and I love the stories that you shared. I think the stories are always great, and they are easily remembered. And I asked Moti to join us and throw a few questions in your direction from the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Ákos. Brilliant conversation. I'll tell you, the Q&A, I don't know if all the panelists had a chance to look at the Q&A. It's gushing. So a lot of comments are coming in. I want to take us back for a second to Tomer, what you said, that you don't have to justify to anyone, right? I mean, and like Nikki said, well, you hired me for a reason, let me do my job. But the reality is, from some of the comments we're getting here, is that researchers do need to come in and justify their work. They need budgets, just like marketing as an initiative that came up, and they're coming in and say, okay, I want this money to do so and so right now. The question is, while they're educating their teams to get more resources, to do more things, how can they justify it using ROI? How can they come in? What are your best tips on do that, and you're most likely to convert on your internal negotiation efforts?
I just refuse to play that game. Sorry.
Oh, so for the others who would like to,
the work should, stand for itself. Of course, you should, explain your work and kind of help everybody understand what you found and why it's important, what they should do about it. But not playing a game of prove it to me.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, I can bring up an article that could be helpful. There's an article by Rich Mironov. It's called ROI of Discovery. And it talks about, he shares his insights of working with many clients, and he has, I think he has worked in 30 years in Silicon Valley relating to discovery. And then talks about, product waste. So building the wrong thing, and what's the success rate of building the wrong thing. And what he's seen is that 35 to 70% is the percentage of product waste in the ideas that we have, right? And then Microsoft, I think they state that it's 66% of their product ideas that fail. In terms of Bing, 85% of A/B tests fail. So there's statistics to show that, if you don't do research, if you don't do discovery, you're going to be unlucky. So it's about increasing your luck in building the right thing for your customers and end users. So Google that article. That could be helpful.
Got it. Another good question that came in and said, okay, we got all the information, we did the research. What are some of the powerful ways that you know of to present that research to the stakeholders within the company? Many of them are not research oriented. They need to process a lot of data quickly. How do you present your research in a compelling way?
Maybe I can pitch in here. I'd say everyone gets convinced by a great story, and everyone's focused on their own incentives. And I think most people forget that. If I'm the salesperson, I'm the marketing person, I have my KPIs. I know what will lead to my next promotion. I know what will lead to my own success. I know what will lead to my department getting more budget. If you choose to present something, to communicate something from your angle, from your incentive, the likelihood that, one, I don't get engaged because it's just not a great story, and two, I don't make the bridge to my own incentives is much higher than if you read the room, if you adjust the story, if you make it compelling, if you align it towards ideally a common mission or at least a common enemy. And if you understand the incentives on the other side and how, whether it's my research or whether it's the vertical or area that I'm trying to provide insights on, help you achieve your own goal, which in the end of the day is just a subpart or sub-metric or an indicator of the overarching goal. So I think this helps if you adjust it that way. Often, you see a lot of people not caring enough about that, and that leads to a result of why does this matter to me? And people disengage.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I know we spoke about, sorry, go ahead, Tomer. Yeah.
Can I add to that? I think that the most important thing, and I've seen a lot of researchers get a little bit confused about that. You make a lot of effort in the beginning. We talked about it earlier, to understand what are your team's questions, what are their knowledge gaps. And then suddenly, happens to a lot of researchers, when you come to present or report or whatever way you choose to do that, these questions are gone and you're talking about everything that you found. Very nice, very interesting, but your team and you agreed on questions you're going to answer. The research is going to be successful not because everybody likes the product. The research is going to be successful because you answered the questions you agreed on with the team. So whatever way you choose to do that, answer the damn questions that you agreed on with the team. That's what they're interested in. And if you don't do that, you leave them confused. And then talk about trust and persuasion and blah, blah, blah. Answer the questions.
Got it. Nikki, I see you nodding passionately. I assume you agree with that.
Yeah, my reports are literally like, this is the question you had. Here's the supporting research. This is the other question you had. Here's the supporting research. Like we take, I don't know what it is. Maybe because we have in our mind that like PowerPoints or slides or presentations need to be like this fancy, pretty thing. And I see so many people be like, oh my goodness, what is it meant to look like? What am I meant to do? And I'm like, the entire point of research is like just to support your teams with those questions that they had. And hopefully the problem that you could run into is if you didn't do all that planning with your team, right? Then you don't know what to put in your report. And if that's the case, well, probably shouldn't be doing the research. But I always say, like, stop mind reading. If you are so super confused, stop mind reading, ask what is most important to them. And just, you know, I as a recovering perfectionist, it really hurt me to admit that I didn't know what I was doing sometimes, and I wasn't sure what I should be putting in a report. But I sat down and I said, okay, just ask the question, and then I reported on that. And lo and behold, people were happy.
And isn't it pretty much the definition of A/B testing? I mean, the reason you're doing A/B testing is because sometimes you don't know, right? That's the purpose of A/B testing, is to experiment with things you don't know. Last question a couple more questions before we move into the next session. Some of the audience members asked, how do you define or how do you go about the roadmap? You know, you have a challenge that was presented to you by either the product team, leadership, whatever it may be. How do you start building the roadmap for your research? What are the first steps we should think about? Big one, right?
I can talk about roadmaps in general, but yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. I mean, I think the key point is alignment, right? Alignment that your research is creating value for the team, that's creating value for the product organization, that's creating value for the company, that there's a clear lineage between your research and the greater good of the product team and the company, right? So you probably need to be proactive in terms of your research, right? To understand what's coming in terms of OKR planning or other types of activities relating to product strategy and so on. So you need to be in tuned what's going on. You can't work in a bubble or a silo as a researcher. You need to understand where you can add value in terms of questions to answer or risks to mitigate or whatever term you have, right? So that will be my answer.
Got it. Anyone else before we are summarizing this session today?
The one thing I can say is, like, I try not to silo roadmaps between teams. That's a great way of just saying you're by yourself because you have your own roadmap, you care about your roadmap. Like, there's a reason it's called product roadmap. It's because it's our plan as one team together to tackle a product, aka solve a problem. So I'd rather look at what's your contribution within your area for the overall product roadmap than saying you have your own research roadmap. Because by doing that, you're also removing the empowerment of people saying, I'm going to design my own process of thinking how I tackle, in this case, research within the overarching roadmap, rather than saying, oh, I need to build a roadmap. Sometimes for research, the roadmap is not a solution. That's not the actual best way, because roadmaps focus on predictability, and often research isn't predictable. Maybe the method is going to be predictable, but the results and the way you adjust your answer to those results isn't. So a roadmap might not even be the best answer for the research team.
Interesting view. Cool. This has been fascinating. Nikki, Andre, Marcus, Tomer, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights today. Again, just by the flow of questions, I can tell that the audience was super tuned into what you have to say. Pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for
Thank you so much. Speak soon. Bye-bye.
And without further ado, we are going to now transition to our next panel. And our next panel is really going to discuss how you can do your research in a fast and thorough way. For a lot of us in emerging companies, especially in emerging companies, you grow on the go. You grow on the go and you have to achieve things while company dynamics is changing, while goals are changing, and you have to adapt very quickly. And that is going to be the topic of the next panel. And I'm going to bring in our panelists today for this session. Hey, Roman, how are you? You can share your video now.
Hello, doing well, and yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for being with us today.
Good to see you, Roman.
Akos, the stage is yours.
Okay, I'm going to also need Josh and Jim on the stage, please.
Yes, they're going to come in 1 second.
Okay, amazing. Then I'll just do the introduction for the current session, and it's a bit. I called it "Doing Research Fast and Thorough." It's well, when I thought about this panel, I thought of Vin Diesel and Fast and Furious, but that didn't really match with the purpose of the panel. Because in the first panel, we discussed why research matters, why it's important to do continuous research. And what I'd like to dig into with you guys is how to do it efficiently and how to be time efficient with that, and look at like good practices, tricks that you either like learned yourself by doing or saw with your clients. And so the rules of the game, they are similar. I also I have a number of questions that I prepared. I'm gonna just distribute them randomly among you. I urge you to reflect on each other's thoughts. And maybe what you can also do in the very beginning when you answer the first question is just say a couple of sentences about yourself. So people know your background a little bit. They can position you on this world map of professional world. All right, so now we have Josh, Jim, and Roman here. To all of you. So what I'd like to do is actually a quick round of survey among the three of you. And the question is, if you decide to do discovery interviews, and let's say with 10 customers, how long does it roughly take you to get from this decision until you have learnings that you can share with your colleagues? Just it doesn't have to be scientific. Just give us a ballpark. Jim, you want to go first?
Sure. I think for a team that's already together, who's done maybe some discovery before, I would say this is about 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think it really depends as well on the scope and the number of users. It's not just the only thing to take into account, but also like the type of user you're talking to, how you want to organize around that. But I would say, yeah, 3 weeks is a sweet spot.
Roman?
Yeah, I think that sounds like an eternity to me. But so Roman, Smigiel, I've been doing product work for like 27, 28 years. My background is finance and with some philosophy and psychology involved. And I've been doing lots of crazy stuff. And I'm in the coffee market right now, CPO for doing coffee stuff. But I would say if you want to go fast and furious in efficiency, I think 4 days, like a design sprint. And the key thing is templatizing, making sure you have your templates ready and going and cutting out anything that's not necessary.
Cool. Thank you. Let me throw the first question at Josh, or not the first, the second one. Josh, you're from Miro, an awesome company. By the way, a loyal user. Even FigJam couldn't convince me to get distracted. But we're not here to promote. I think the tool itself promotes itself. So the point, what I wanted to ask is, you said like 3 weeks. What keeps you from being faster? What are the typical roadblocks and hurdles to be faster?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think, by the way, that 4 days is an amazing turnover for this. So I would be very keen to learn how to accelerate this. But the way I think about research has 5 different steps, right? It's planning, recruiting, interacting with the user. In this case, we're talking about interviews, then analyzing, and finally documenting and sharing. That for me is just 2 kinds of the same thing, right? And what prevents me from going faster is if I look at each of these 5 steps, the first one in planning would be alignment, right? It's not always clear the type of questions, the research questions that we want to focus on, and how to turn those into interview questions in this case. So it needs alignment with the different people from the team. And then what you don't want it is to rush into, recruitment, which is the second one, not knowing which are the right questions, because that impacts which type of people you want to talk to, right? And how many different groups, and how big do you want the sample, and all that. And also, like, potentially how much do you need to reward that type of profiles for the time. And then the interaction itself is the one that is more self-contained. So in there, it depends on how many sessions the team can take a day, right? Me personally, I don't like taking more than 3-4 sessions per individual, because I think after the 3rd or 4th session, you don't start paying the attention that it requires. But of course, if there is more people involved, you can take more per day. And then finally, the analysis, it depends on the amount of information that you're collecting as well. And documenting and sharing, it will also depend how much you need to share it. Like, what's the scope of the research? Is it something more long-term? Then you might need to adapt different parts of the report and the presentation for different type of audiences that you want to share in. And the same with all sorts of documentation that you're creating, right? Like, it will really depend on the scope of the research. But those would be, like, let's say, the stopping points for each step of the process, in my opinion.
Jim, you have any thoughts or stories to share?
Sure. A little background on my part. I've been a product discovery coach for about 8 years now, and through my teams, done about 700 of these interviews, and seen a variety of cycles, from the sprint that Roman's talking about to much longer cycles. I think, when I think of 10 users, we're usually recruiting like 12 or 13 to talk to 10. So there's a little bit of churn in there. I'm also thinking in 10 users, I want to do like 2 cycles. I want to have a prototype and a concept, show it to 5, then have another like mini round of design so I can kind of tweak it. And so I'm actually adding time on purpose when I'm talking to 10. And then there's a little bit about sustainability. So, like, how many times can my teams get together and sprint, versus if I'm a boss and I want my team to be fast but thorough, it's like a sustainability thing. So, like, they've got things in delivery, they've got things that they should be measuring. There's other things they're doing as a regular product basis for product teams. So I think I slow it down because I know that they can't maintain that cadence if it's too fast. And what they're kind of like, really, they'll really put a lot of energy into it, and then there'll be this lull afterward where they won't do discovery for a long time because they're just tired. Like Josh was saying, the kind of tiredness of talking to users. So there's something about stretching it out in that way. But like Roman said, you can absolutely, if you need to, you could do it.
So Roman, let's dig into your process, because it seems like an interesting one and thought-provoking. Can you share with us how you do it in 4 days, and how you came to this? I think that would be also interesting to hear your journey to come up with this approach.
Yeah, like, I think all good product people are thieves. You steal versus reinventing. This area has been around for so many years, and I think everyone always has a better way, or they want their own way. Why not steal the patterns that work? So when you look at a typical design sprint, there's the old style of doing 5 days and the newer style of doing 4. And how did I come across this? So, like, over lots of years, probably like Jim knows, you kind of see patterns. Like, a design sprint in 4 days is something that you usually do over 6 months. But this distillation down is to get you very focused and to execute and do something amazing. I think I've seen this work the best. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago at Flaconi. We did 2 design sprints, and they were 4 days to prove a concept. And it's a very great way of finding out, like, throwing something on the wall, being very focused, picking about 3 to 5 people, because there's research that shows that after about 3 or 4, you see the pattern. And then you kind of iterate. And how do you move fast and furious to show off all your research? You pick a methodology like the Wall of Justice, you know? And you can use something which was called real-time board a long, long time ago when I first started using it, to Miro. And you just have all your screens, the people, reds, greens, boom, 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 boom. You quickly document, you summarize, and you move forward. So we did it because we wanted to align the whole company, move forward on an area that we weren't sure. And how could we do this fast enough? And if you look at a 2-week sprint, if you're executing, you do 4 days, you recruit, you do all this stuff. The last day, which is the 5th day, you summarize, and then you can build out your tasks, and then you can build out an MVP or like a lightweight prototype the following week in 4 days or in 5 days. So that was kind of the general approach. It was stealing stuff. It was captured through Google, through the Sprint book, and so on. So it's just something that's become far more popular over the years. But I find that to be an incredibly powerful tool. Fast and furious, get to the point, move on. Don't get stuck in the details. Once you get stuck in the details, you have thousands of requirements, and it doesn't matter. So, and if you have research questions, you should probably have one core one, and then you have a series of 4 or 5 in there that you're cycling through as a hypothesis. You probably modify that question in a little bit slightly different way because people answer questions a certain way. And then you have 2 or 3 stuffers. You templatize the demographic and the closing, and you're ready to go. And boom, 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 you're done.
Sweet. This actually brings me to the next topic I wanted to throw in, because as Josh walked us through, there's like a lot of steps, many micro steps in the research process, from the moment you come up with your research plan until you present your learnings. And the question to you is, and let's start with Jim this time. What is it that you think like a good steps in this process that can be automated, and what are good examples have you come across? You're on mute yet.
Automated in which part?
That's the question. So which one,
okay.
parts do you think can be and should be automated to be more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think that finding users, getting that stream of people showing up in your calendar, is something Teresa Torres talks a lot about. So how can these people show up on your calendar so that you can talk to them? And there's this sort of movement of like doing discovery in cycles. And then there's this, well, I expect you to be doing discovery. You of course need users as input. So users become the forcing function to your research. And what that means for teams is that they need to have a couple types of research to be ready. So I'll have them have like 3 most important questions. So let's say they don't have a prototype or solution test. But when that automated user comes in and they've got the interview for half an hour, 45 minutes, they've got something to talk to them about and to extract some value. When they got solutions to test, then they can test those solutions. So for me, all those ways to automate the user showing up on your calendar, there's screening questions they need to answer. Are your screener questions good enough to get the right person? So you're typically refining those. And I do think that you can refine your screener questions to get people to sort of automatically show up. There's some business-to-business use cases where you might want to talk to somebody before they get on the phone, but I like that area. I've not yet moved into automated like prototype creation through AI. Haven't done that. Haven't seen that work. Haven't seen analysis of conversations do that well. I think summarizing them is okay, but you miss the power of verbatim quotes. But I'll stop there and let someone else finish the answer. But that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. The other 2 guys, do you have anything else to add? Could be examples, could be stories, could be cool tools that you used. And Jim mentioned recruiting. As I think that's like that was the most dominant part.
Yeah, I can go next. I was just waiting in case Roman had a point. But so when I think about automatizing, for me, this is part of research jobs at the end of the day, right? And when I think about research jobs, the most painful part, or the part that you want to invest more energy, because normally the most challenging one is definitely recruiting, right? From at least the steps that I mentioned. Then said, so it is difficult to automatize recruiting, right? So one of the ways that I've experienced in the past, or I've experimented with in the past, is taking a stream of the data we get from users in forms of feedback. So we're constantly collecting feedback from users in surveys or small forms that you send when there is some type of use in the product, and then trying to classify the type of topic that the users are discussing in there, and try to reach out if they are subscribed, of course, to communications. You have to be GDPR compliant, which is another challenge that you face in that case. So there are ways of standardizing that part. And then for the analysis as well, I think that lately the new tools are very, very good and proficient in transcribing, for example, interviews, and giving you the topics and making it very easy to find the quotes, and creating highlight reels that are like, like sort of affinity clusters of topics that have been discussed. Of course, like the elephant in the room in this case is AI as well, right? That I personally have experimented with, but I'm not a heavy user in terms of analysis for research session, partially because I believe that there is an important step in the analysis, which is thinking about what you've experienced, right, with the team, and like reading back and forth, starting to connecting the dots. This is something that the AI is not most of the times able to do. AI is very good to kind of spotting the patterns and giving you like highlights, but that's not everything that you normally need. And another thing that came to my mind about automatization, and I'll wrap it up with this, is that something I recommend doing, and I do myself, I'm a big fan of doing this, is creating, like sort of documentation for everything. Like I like leaving breadcrumbs of I did this by doing that type of documentation, in which you leave a trace or a checklist of the steps that you followed. If there were templates, as Roman was mentioning, it's also very powerful, because if someone else wants to piggyback on that later, they will be able to do so. And then this way, you're kind of automatizing the whole process by creating a global checklist for that specific type of research effort you're conducting, that anyone will be able to replicate in the future if it's well done. Otherwise, you will hear the questions from them. So it's also good feedback.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I would just add that I don't know if it's automating, but I think it's just having access to a nice pool of candidates is always easy, but you can always go to where they're at and quickly recruit that way too. So like, since we work in the coffee area, if you go to a cafe, you pre-qualify, boom, you're there. And I think that's pretty powerful. The nice thing that I've seen with AI, I don't know how many of you use Clarity, so Microsoft Clarity. It's a screen tracking and it has heat maps, and they incorporated in this little AI kind of widget. And what it does is it quickly analyzes your video and gives you a summary. And I think this is quite good to look at like mass amounts of things that you may have missed, and it gives you a nice pattern to then deep dive. And I think this is a very cool thing, because, the point of qualitative research for me is that it's about one question, but it's not about a standardized set of questions. It's like their guidance to help you deep dive when you notice a pattern that sounds interesting. And that's the beauty of it versus quantitative, where you can automate a bunch of stuff. This, pick who you want, boom, wham, bam, you have a bunch of data. Now you can go to the qualitative stuff.
Cool. Let's, since you guys brought up AI, it would have been my next topic. So you provided the great segue. My question was, or is, where do you use AI today in the research process? And what are the pros and cons? What's your experience with it? Where does it shine, and where do you think it fails or needs to get better? And I'm not going to pick a person now, so I'm just going to see who jumps at the question first to change the dynamics.
I think for mass, so I'll jump in, for like if you're doing mass videos and you want to see a pattern, I think that's quite good. But, you know, having a dialogue with a person, unless it really knows what you want it to say and to figure out, because it's kind of like you're playing a two-way communication street. So like, I think with AI, if you start to do that too much, you probably get into this loop of it responding and then that responding, and they kind of get together to figure out how they want to answer each other versus really finding out insights. So I think for lots of information, if you're doing lots of recordings and other stuff, and then you want to maybe review or do a quick take of like, have we missed anything from loads and loads of videos? It's quite good, I think, or transcribing and other stuff. But outside of that, at least for now, I wouldn't use it. In the future, it may be pretty good, I would say. But right now, it's not there. It's probably good for finding out patterns, and that's it.
Yeah, I can go next, Jim, if you don't mind. I think on top of what Roman is saying, another use I give more often is actually rewriting. I'm not a native speaker, right, in English. And, you know, I think it's very important to make sure that at least what you're writing, and I'm trying to think in which phases I use this more for rewriting, but I guess it's more when you are creating the presentation or report or however you document the findings. I think sometimes it's difficult to encapsulate such a complex information in a paragraph, and, you know, like, you also need to take into account that the attention span that the people is going to put on your report is not unlimited. So you definitely want to have like things there that are crystal clear. So what I like doing is I write stuff and then I bounce it back with AI to see if there is a better way to rewrite that in a more engaging way, for example, if that's the objective. Or if we're talking about, you know, like questions, I also want to be them very, very clear so that everyone understands those questions. That's maybe more useful for surveys, but can also be applied to interview guides. So yeah, definitely rewriting, or at least, you know, getting inspired of how to say certain things with a clear purpose in mind is one of the uses I personally give to AI, to generative AI.
I'll just say as a coach, I don't have my own captive interviews. So the data is often my client data, and they have not yet a lot of them haven't become comfortable or have sort of specific bans on using generative AI. So throwing in their future ideas, which is inherently what we're doing in discovery, you know, they're not necessarily that comfortable. I know people are doing it, but I haven't had a chance to really do much with it.
Okay, I want to pick up a question from the audience because it relates to what we're discussing, and it comes from the angle of data security and data privacy when you use AI. And the question is, how do you balance security and privacy? When you work in product development, how do you handle the concern of sharing private and confidential content that we wouldn't want to share and just providing it to like ChatGPT or whichever other tool out there? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so in our case, like PII information is something that we put in the first, you know, priority of everything we do. Since the moment, as I was saying in the very beginning, that we recruit someone, we want to make sure we're not reaching out to people who said that they don't want to be reached out. And of course, in an ideal world, if we could reach those people, we could get access faster. But then, in this case in particular, what we did even before we started using AI, or some of us might be using AI, is we always remove PII information, you know, like personal identifiable information from any report. So you wouldn't be able to know who said what. And you know, we create like fake names, and we never display images that are real images next to potential quotes that we're reporting. So we make it impossible for anyone really in the organization to identify who said that, right? And then in terms of AI, it's the same principle. We don't, or yeah, I don't think we grab all the information, throw it to AI and say, think for us and bring it back. It's more like specific pieces of the research study that we want to, you know, get I take, you know, I understand AI as another person sitting on the table, right? And I ask them the questions that I know they are best at. but I am also very conscious that it's another person on the table, and I try to treat that as another person on the team that doesn't necessarily need to know everything about the people that we are dealing with from a user perspective, right? So yeah, just being careful of not mixing and including information that it's sensitive in this case. It's how we prevent this from happening.
I think I've really nothing else to add. I think it's the same thing. We try to abstract some of this information, and like with even in clarity, the core information of who someone is abstracted, and then you kind of see all of the private information blocked out, and it's enough for the AI to kind of figure out what is there, and that's it. And then when we do user interviews and so on, it's usually two people, and we always abstract who it is and so on. We have similarities of pictures and this stuff, but it's never the exact person. And then, like, you know, for videos or other things, there's a typical data privacy time frame where, you know, after 1 year, after 6 months, we delete it and that's it, you know, and we just have some transcripts.
It's actually made me think, if I can add, sorry, Jim, very quick. If I can add, like, in the very beginning, when this started to be a thing, we didn't want to use it because we were like, wait, we need to understand what this means, you know, in terms of privacy. And we were not using it for a while, but then it became literally impossible to prevent this from happening. And the first thing we did was to, you know, reach out to legal and try to understand, hey, this is happening. Like, at some point, we'll need to, you know, start the wave as everyone else. So what are like the limitations that we need to take into account and all that? And yeah, they gave us the green light in that sense. And then yeah, we followed the procedures since then. And I think as researchers, we're used to that type of limitation, so it's not a big deal.
This might be a slightly different, you know, crowd between the US, where I'm based, and Europe, where, you know, I do ask users, can we use your video and information internally to improve our product? And I will use their video and information internally to improve the product. There's no reason to include like their last name. I usually do like a first name and an initial, but I will include screenshots of their face, and I do encourage that as a way to make users real. I find that people who work in offices, who work on software, they get too attached to personas, and the personas become more real than real people. And so I don't necessarily believe in obfuscating everything about people. I understand there is some risk, but I do have people purposely approve the ability to use the stuff internally. As you put that into external tools, you have to figure out legally whether these tools fit your legal criteria. And so and then you have to decide whether you trust that company, right? So they may have stated terms and conditions that they do wall off the data, and that they do have a data, you know, they delete it within 6 to 12 months. But again, legally, these aren't necessarily, you have to decide what's the law and you have to decide what's your company policy. You know, I encourage teams to make the research feel real. And if you can get some benefit out of it and it's legally permissible, then you can use that to your advantage, perhaps. But if it's not legally permissible, or your company doesn't allow you to do it, then don't do it.
Yeah, cool. On AI, I also wanted to ask you guys, like, do you think it's going to make product teams lazier because they can do so many things and bypass steps? Or is it going to like build them like additional muscles so they can do research faster? And probably the world is the two ends of the scale, like a very lazy and very powerful researcher and product manager. But I'm just thinking to what extent or how you see that of outsourcing a little bit the thinking to AI and thinking that it can like answer some questions better than the humans and not taking the time to go through.
I think if it's used well, it gives you a little more time, because I think if you look at product work, you know, I'm not a researcher by trade. I come from doing product management, figuring out what's ticking in someone's head. You know, why top of mind, top of heart? Why are they really hiring us to do something? So I see it that research is usually done the least amount. It's always like, I think it should be this way. So if you have something that's helping you out, it's giving you a little more time to breathe and to think about things, because, you know, requirements are key. But if you're spending all your time doing requirements, when are you spending time talking to other people? And I think it gives you a balancing act for that. At least that's what I would see.
Unfortunately, I have to go, but I've got one comment for here is that if AI is the sum of our current understanding, usability is something that's well understood, that's well researched, that's well documented. And I could see computers doing a lot of this area. What I find that humans in product all over the world aren't doing well is what's the value of this? What's the hypothesis I've got for this particular thing? And so I don't expect AI to come up with good hypotheses about the future of the company and the future of the product because it doesn't really exist in the data that it's collected. It's possible it might come out with something interesting like that. I've yet to see anything terribly interesting, but I would say that between value testing and usability testing, I would be happy to see computers help things be less confusing and have product teams really focus on what that next thing would be. So. Thanks, Akosh. Thanks, Roman. Thanks, Josh.
Well, that was like a mic drop. I think that yeah, to share a little bit of my thoughts about your question. I think the AI provides it's a tool, right? And if we think of other tools that have brought like a sort of paradigm shift. What happens here in this case, the way I see it is it provides the luxury of moving from creators to reviewers in an extreme way, right? So you no longer have to take care if you want to. Again, this is like an extreme use case, but if you want, you no longer need to rely on you thinking about creating a piece of text, for example, and assuming that that the first result or the result that you're looking for is good enough for what you're trying to do, and moves your responsibility as an individual to review and to tweak that result, right? So that's as Roman was saying, that kind of gives you more space to do other type of stuff, right? So I think it definitely will impact how we think about certain roles and responsibilities. But I would never say that it makes us lazier, right? The fact that you stop doing certain things because it can be automated by a machine doesn't make you lazier. Back in the day, to switch on a lamp, it took a lot of effort. Today is a switcher. Does it make you lazier to switch on a light? No, it's just easier, right? So you can focus on other stuff. So I think it's kind of the same idea.
Just jumping in for a second to this amazing conversation. We got a question asking, based on the theme of this discussion, how to perform research fast and thorough. How do you go about balancing time, we need results now, and quality? So I guess for the startup community that is attending here and is asking this question, CEOs, CPOs, everyone is like now. How do you go about balancing time and quality?
So like before you get started with everyone, there's a continuum. So, it's like you can't have the best quality now immediately. So there's a continuum of fast or slow, high quality, low quality, long time, short time. And you have to pick that when you're doing things and then stick with it. And it's all about prioritization. So product is always about prioritization and making compromises. So you cannot do everything, and you turn it back and say, hey guys, do you want this now or do you want this now? And for me, software is very communal. So it's not just product saying what and, engineering. It's all of us kind of working together. Yes, it's not a democracy, but it's working and really figuring out what is the most important thing right now. And that's pretty much it. That's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, when you asked this question, Matti, first thing that came to my mind is this book by Rob Fitzpatrick, The Mom Test, which is an amazing book, right? And in this book, I would say the main idea that stuck with me was that research is more like an attitude, right? So it's all about learning about users. So we tend to, as I was doing in the very beginning, when they asked me about the research process, I'm like, yes, this is the research process, and this is when we're gonna do this and that, and there is a certain planning. But at the same time, if you acknowledge that you can continuously be learning about users, you can adopt this attitude of every time you have an interaction with someone that might be someone you can learn from, just do it. And again, I won't go into details on how to. I think it's a short book and really nice written, so I would definitely encourage to do that. But I really like this idea of guerrilla testing, right? It's not for every type of projects, but I think it's important to embrace this idea of you can learn about users in many forms. You can go to forums, you can go to where they are, as Roman was saying as well, right? So it's not just about, making the most efficient process for planning, recruiting, analyzing, etc. But it's also about finding ways that are like more lightweight and less process heavy, in which you can also learn from users, right? Or another example is live intercepts, which is called time conscious research in certain books as well. This idea of placing a sort of, it's like fishing, like you place like a sort of small window to collect feedback on your website, and then you wait till someone answers, and then the next question is, hey, would you like to jump for a quick chat now? And then there you go. You can dedicate some time in situ to have this conversation with that users about that particular thing that you're interested, right? So there are definitely ways in which you can work around this idea of following the whole process. And I would tend to agree that it has a cost, right? Like the fact that you can plan and recruit the right people, it's about probabilities. It's about probabilities of asking the right questions to the right people. But if you're willing to risk that part and embrace the fact that you can also play the game of going faster with a little bit more risk, definitely do it. It's also fun.
And you touched about something very, very important here, Josh, and that's the recruitment, right? And especially in a grow on the go environment like emerging companies, the logistical part of getting the audience is probably one of the most time consuming elements. And you have companies like us at Airtime that obviously that's our job, that's what we can help you do. But assuming all other things that you need to take into consideration, and Roman, you can jump into that as well. What are kind of the best practices that you have on getting the right audience for your research quickly, so you can report up or parallel very quickly on your finding? How do you recruit? What are your best tips on recruiting users very quickly?
Go where they are. I think this is like probably the key aspect. Another aspect, very, very easy, is like, if you're sending emails, why not do the Outlook approach and have a little thing like, hey, you love our order, you love this thing, do you want to do user research? And you can't believe how many people love to do user research this way. Or Atlassian does an amazing job of having a little help icon. You click on it, it's like, hey, we answered your question, do you want to do this? So if you can have these kinds of things, amazing way of finding them. But the simplest thing is go where they're at. And that's pretty much it. And that's the fastest thing. Or you can also use really kind of interesting, here in Germany, we've used like eBay Classifieds. It's no longer eBay Classifieds. You just post. LinkedIn, you can post just little teasers, little images. Certain things are key things that people are looking out for. And those are the people that at least are good. You have a large audience that are coming in, pre-qualify them and move on. Cool. The design sprint community does that quite a bit. Like they'll post in a variety of different forums, and this is how they quickly move, like Facebook, LinkedIn, the social media aspects, targeting a specific ad. And it's really, really fast to get people in that way. Are they perfect? Probably not, but you're looking for, a certain area, and then you can double down once you get into a specific feedback cycle that you want to get into.
Interesting. That's very useful. Josh?
Yeah, those are all fantastic tips. I was trying to think of more that works. So assuming that the miracle of ending up talking to someone after they've scheduled the time in the calendar and they show up, what I try to do is as well, at the end of the session, try to assess if that's a person worth talking to again, right, for a specific topic. Maybe you've recruited them for a certain part of the product, but you realize that might have been better for another one. So I always ask them the question, hey, do you want to be reached out in the future? And if so, we create like a sort of pool or user advisory panel in which we kind of classify users by topic, so to speak, right? And those people are normally active and quick to respond. So if you're looking into a specific topic, you know who to go to straight if they are on that list. And another thing that is related to this to do at the end of the session is to ask those people to put you in touch to people they might know from the network, to introduce to people they might know, to talk about the very same thing, right? So you create this sort of referral program, so to speak, by using that network effect. It might be someone from the same company, but it might be also, you know, like ex-colleagues or someone they know on LinkedIn, and then you basically follow their leads and try to get to those people. So those are ways to reuse kind of the very same users for different learnings, and or invite new people that they might know. And then everything else that it has to do with, you know, like how to attract those users in the first place. Like I would say rewarding is key, right? Like it's not that people just move for the money, but of course, if there is some sort of compensation at the end, it will be easier to attract those people. So try to compensate according to who you're trying to get in. And then, yeah, don't spam as well, right? Like make sure that if aligned with marketing and
rule number one, don't spam.
Yeah, if they receive, it's very basic, right? But if they receive like a message that morning from the marketing team, and then you send them in the next hour one for research, they'll be like, this company is just, you know, spammers. I don't want to pay attention to their emails. So you don't want to burn out those sorts of communications.
Speaking of the topic of fast and thorough, we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to, with your permission, dive into your personal experiences. And if you can come up on the spot with a personal story that, you know, of how you had to change your research direction based on an emergent need that just came up, and how did you kind of shifted your research approach? So you were doing something, CEO, CPO, whatever it is, coming in saying, we have to do this. How do you go about switching the order? What are your tips for those who need to do so?
So I never experienced this idea of, you know, someone else comes from whatever level and says like, we need to switch the order. What happened though very often, especially if you have something you're testing, like any sort of design artifact, is that you want to iterate. And for me, the first and two sessions, like normally are mostly for iteration. Like I don't expect any good findings out of them, because I acknowledge that probably we're not asking the right questions, or maybe we've made a mistake assuming that those were the right people to talk to. So I think it's very important that, especially in the first debriefs after the session, you sit with the team to assess not only what you've learned, but also if what you're doing works. And if it doesn't, change it, right? So examples of that happens many times, because again, it's something that I believe should happen. But I cannot think of any, you know, like insane change on the scope, or sudden change on the scope, to be honest.
Roman?
Yeah, I wouldn't see any massive changes either. Usually it's small, incremental. Like after the first 2 or 3, you kind of see a pattern, and then you pivot. But you always have a focus for doing user research. I would never do more than like one hypothesis. So, and in the end, I'm usually the decision maker. So I say no. I first ask why, and then I say no. And then I offer options.
That's important, to first ask why and then say no, not to just say no as they come.
Yes.
That is brilliant. Okay, very well. I'm going to check with our audience here again. First and foremost, Roman and Josh, thank you so much for being with us. We have Marcus, our next panelist, coming for the next discussion already. Brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time today. We really appreciate it. For the audience, for those of you who are sharing, if we're going to share the recording, yes, after the event, we're going to share the full recording of the summit. And in the meantime, just a reminder that if you want to reach out to one of us at Airtime, our calendar link is in the chat. So feel free to use the calendar link for any other questions or personal conversations around Airtime or the summit. Josh, Roman, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. See you around.
Perfect. And what we're going to do next is we are going to bring our next panelist to learn how to not lose a customer in 10 days, which is a pretty interesting topic to discuss: customer retention, user research. How do we keep them in-house? And for that, we have Marcus Müller here. Hey, Marcus.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we're also going to be joined by Jared Schreiber. We're going to give him a second, and you're going to see his face on the screen. But with that being said, Akos, I'm turning it over to you again.
Yes, thanks a lot. So while we're waiting for Jared to join us, in this particular session, you were supposed to be 3 people. It's going to be cozier. It's just going to be Marcus and Jared with me. Lior, he's based in Israel, and he just wrote a couple of minutes ago that he can't make it. We'll find a chance when times are calmer and better, more suitable to get him on the show again, because he has so many like fantastic insights. But Marcus has awesome stories. You've been to one of my webinars. It was amazing to listen to you from your stories with N26 and Cirque, and now we have Jared here as well. Hi there.
Oh,
so it's the 3 of us, and mostly I just throw the balls, and then you have to catch them. It's the 2 of you, but we have like plenty of topics and questions, and I also urge you, because you have more airtime, feel free to share stories, and feel free to go deeper into any of these questions. And the topic is how to not lose customers in 10 days, which is a reflection on that Matthew McConaughey movie back in the days when he wasn't an A-class actor in Inception and similar movies. But the point being that startups put a lot of effort on acquiring customers and optimizing channels for customer acquisition. But then you get them across the line, they create an account. How do you make sure that they don't churn very quickly? They see the value of your product, and they become active customers for a long period of time. And this is like the topic that I'd like to discuss with the 2 of you. And I'd like to start with an article that I read from Atlassian. It was one of the product managers of Atlassian, and they said that it takes a new user about 30 minutes to decide if that particular Atlassian tool is suitable for them, and to give like a yes or no. And I think Atlassian is in a privileged position. I wonder, what do you think? How much time does a user in your companies where you worked in the past, how much did they take to decide whether they take your product or they don't? And let's start with Jared.
sure. Well, I've had an extreme across the B2B2C spectrum. On the B2B side, $1 million investments where, you know, a senior vice president is expecting their team members to use the software. The team members are going to invest in it hours trying to figure out if it'll work for them. And on the flip side, you know, I've had mobile apps like Out of Milk, the world's most used shopping list app, or other apps where you probably have about 10 to 15 seconds to engage the consumer and help them understand the value proposition of the app, or you're going to lose them. So yes, I would say Atlassian is more in the extreme, but it really depends on the product category, the level of investment from the customer into you know, the job to be done by your product.
Yeah, I can really feel you, Jared, because I've also experienced both extremes. In kick scooter sharing, for example, we have had users who like are in front of a kick scooter, download the app, try to unlock the scooter broken, and you never see this customer again. It's like a couple of seconds. While N26, of course, like if you convert a customer, they go through a quite long, even though considering traditional banks, an 8-minute sign-up process for a bank account is fast, but it's still a long 15 steps. You get the card, video verification, you know, that stuff process. And then it's like customers receive their card. There's so many steps. They have to load their initial account, have to make their first purchase. So for N26, we realized like, okay, we need to get to customer to the first couple of payments do first interactions. Like we've identified this is a critical point, because then they started using the product more and more and more. But like just signing up, just getting the card, even activating the card, or doing one transaction. I don't remember how many it was, like a handful of transactions where we've seen, okay, now like users start to become active. So we don't talk about seconds here, but we still talk about minutes. And now I'm completely in the other extreme. We do B2B for medical device manufacturers, large corporates. We have a couple of weeks of negotiations, onboarding, very similar to what you said, like very different level of engagement. I think it's very important that you understand in what business you are and tailor the experience to whatever is needed for the given industry. And I think that is the most important piece here.
Marcus, I think something that we share from our experience is there's usually a moment or an action that happens sometime after the initial download or registration, that if you can get a user to engage in that action, then the clock starts in terms of your ability to retain. And until you get somebody to do that, it's a total crapshoot whether or not that person's going to continue.
Totally agree. I think and this is what you should identify. What is this initial action for the user to realize, there's really value. Like kick scooter sharing, if someone never took a kick scooter, it's probably a first ride, completing the first ride. If you have taken a lot of rides, it's a bit of commodity. So it's more like, is the overall experience better with this service? Like scooter, does it feel the scooter good? Is that simple to unlock and so on? So it might take them a couple of rides even. And yeah.
I would argue in competitive situations like that, and this ties to some research I did in the consumer goods industry, it comes down to what happens on their very next occasion when they have an option to do it again or not. So for example, in a competitive situation where they're already familiar with this type of product or service and they're successful the first time, they're really baselining and comparing that to what they're familiar with as an alternative. And so you will only know if you've been successful if they're effectively choosing you again on the very next occasion when they have that need.
Yeah, fully agree.
So I'm really interested in how you, both of you and your respective companies, how you figured out that pivotal moment when a customer just clicked and they said, okay, I can literally pinpoint it to this particular step that this customer likes my product and is going to continue using that.
I'll go ahead and start. I'll pick an example from an app my team created years ago called Receipt Hog. It convinced consumers to take pictures of their shopping receipts every time they went shopping, no matter where they shopped or what they bought. And they would get some kind of financial reward, and we would get the anonymous data for market research purposes. And what we were finding were huge retention differences depending on the user acquisition channel. If we'd done a pay-per-click type campaign in a mobile game, we'd get a lot of downloads, but we may not get registrations. If we'd done it via different means, like a Tapjoy, maybe we'd get the download and the registration, but we wouldn't get people taking pictures of the receipts. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up dividing users into different cohorts of how we had acquired them. And we figured out, where does their behavior normalize? From what point forward in using our service or our app does future behavior normalize, where it doesn't matter where they came from anymore? And that was the magic moment. And it turned out for us with Receipt Hog, the magic moment was not downloading the app. It was not registering for the app. It was not filling out a basic questionnaire. It was taking a picture of their first shopping receipt. And from that point forward, no matter how we had acquired that user, from word of mouth, from pay-per-click, or whatever, on a cohort basis, the behavior was the same, regardless of acquisition channel.
Yeah, I think that is the particular challenge for the early days. It takes time to figure out. It takes time you need a little bit of data, you need some experience. And like, for example, we are currently in an industry with very long sales cycles, a very long time to really get activation, because we don't have a weekly use case. It's more of a monthly use case. So this is that, then you need to look for sometimes early indicators that can maybe point you to things to say, okay, if that happens, it's likely that something else is happening. So we're doing a smart job in mapping your drivers, so to say, in the business is helpful, and really understanding the business model and then study it. So in 26, we did a lot of cohort analysis throughout, like from many different points. But to be honest, in the first year, we were almost kind of like, it took us since at least 6 months after launch to have a decent data set. So we were able to do some proper cohort analysis, because in the beginning, like everything went so fast, so we didn't have even the real data to do this analysis. So we were just more coming with qualitative interviews and trying to understand, okay, is that really the point? So your confidence grows as you gather more data, if you're gain experience in the field. And I think this is why being hypothesis driven and experiment driven, say, okay, that's my current assumption, but don't like challenge that assumption again and again and again, till at some point it might be very clear for your business because you have a lot of proof points. Start with an early assumption and try to again to prove it.
But you can tie that assumption to where do we think the customer is going to realize the value of our product, right? So in other words, it's not something that they do, it's a point at which they get some reward or value or use out of the product versus, you know, they're doing things that you need them to do in order to use your service versus they're getting some benefit or reward back out. Like that transition point, that inflection point in the journey seems to me one of your starting points to explore when you don't have the data yet, when you don't have the ongoing usage data. And then the second thing I would say is from a B2B analytics product that I worked on for a number of years, what we found was if a user ran a report to understand sales of a product through a retailer, for example, and then their next action was to go run the exact same report with either a different product or a different retailer, we had them. We basically, they're like, ooh, now I want to see it this way, or now I want to see it for that, or whatever. And if they were willing to wait a minute or two for it to run, and like it took us a while to realize that. It wasn't obvious to us immediately, but that's another example where there's this kind of repeated behavior, a tweak of the behavior, and that's kind of a way to know that, okay, you've got them hooked now.
I think I try to sum it up. It's like, it's not easy. It's not straightforward. It's not one answer. It's like you start with qualitative research, try to understand, study the thing, run experiments. At some point, cohort data will guide the way, but pay attention to this. I think that's the important thing. Like pay attention to figure out what is this moment and what is this tipping point, and optimize the experience to this point. And I fully agree what you said is like the sales channels, or the channels like be it sales or marketing, it's very important. And product and sales/marketing work together really well. I see this in so many companies where sales and marketing does something completely different than what product does. And if that's not aligned, this is like making it very hard for everyone. And unfortunately, it's rarely the case.
Sure. Actually, there's something you touched on that I think is really important here, which is as soon as you find what that kind of tipping point of value creation is, optimize everything up until that point so that it becomes as streamlined and easy and as fast as possible for the consumer to reach that point quickly. That kind of that tipping point of, okay, I've gotten value out of this. I can see the value in this app or this service or something like that.
So you optimize that time to value, and the way you know what is value is that you see repeat behavior or like a jump in. Okay.
Yeah. Or you see that all of a sudden the inbound cohort doesn't matter anymore if once they get to that point, that behavior from that point forward is the same, or regardless of acquisition channel, behavior after that point is the same. You know, those are some ways that you can have an indication.
Yeah, I want to add one last thing to this, because you said inbound cohort. We also focused a lot because we had the N26 such a complex sign-up process with so many steps that got diluted a lot by depending on where people were coming from which marketing channel. So we focused a lot on the organic channel because that was the most stable one. And we knew, okay, when we make an impact on that one, it's likely to make an impact on the overall channel, so to say. So that's why I like your inbound/organic field to say, okay, that's most likely the one you can focus on. if you don't have advanced analytics and so on capabilities.
Cool. Guys, you already touched upon some, and you mentioned a few KPIs that relate to the like measuring and the data. And I just wanted to focus on that topic a little bit. And in your businesses, what kind of dashboards did you build? What kind of KPIs did you track to have an idea of where you have an activation problem and how and to see the impact or like come up with measures how to improve that?
Yeah, I can give you again two very different examples: N26 consumer business and like current setup. And I think what is similar with both is like in the early days, you look at again at leading indicators. This can be qualitative metrics such as a net promoter score or Alice score or something. But then, of course, there's more truth within real retention metrics and particularly churn metrics. But churn is always a lagging indicator. So it might take quite long to see whether users are churning or not. And that's why I think like N26, we started a lot looking at different levels of activity. We had a group of so-called financial active users. This was the lowest level of activity. You did an interaction within a given time frame. Then we had regular active user, and we had the salary accounts, so kind of power users, with different groups of intensity of usage. And we were trying to manage people upwards in that. So say, okay, you first get here and then go upwards and say, okay, what's the share of people in what kind of group? And then measure that on different retention cohorts. And then also measured not only like, and even the way we measured activity had multiple facets, like from how many actions did you do in the app, but also from a financial point of view, what's the transaction volume, for example, that you have? Is that going up or down? Not just the actions that you have. So it has a lot of different aspects, but when it comes down, it's really retention, different types of retention metrics, and then always a bit combined with the qualitative parts. And now we are in a B2B business, and we only got started. Like we have 20 clients that currently test our product. We've signed the first customers. And here we have very little retention metrics. So the first thing we did is an NPS survey, because it's a question that is easy to start with. Say, hey, after first onboarding, first usage, would you recommend this to someone? Alice score is, I think it's better. The question of like how likely, like if I would take away the product from you, how disappointed would you be? I think that's a better question, but I cannot ask as a user who used the product 1 or 2 times. I would rather wait a little bit to see somewhat of a usage and then say, okay, what if I take it away from you now? How disappointed are you? So that's our step 2. And then step 3 is retention. And step 4 is like in our business where you have a 1-year contract, is like looking at churn, like real churn, meaning contract cancellations. So yeah, I hope that gives a bit of a feeling.
Yeah.
Happy to hear what you.
If I could just add, I think the benefits of Net Promoter Score is that you can do it almost immediately. So you can get really quick feedback, no matter how long the customer has been a customer or using it. And it's super benchmarkable from the standpoint of you can know exactly where you stand relative to other kinds of products and services in the general kind of industry and whether you're doing well or not. And then the third is more and more research is demonstrating that it ties really well to actual word of mouth. Like it's a multiplier. People who rate you 1 to 6 are gonna do very tiny amounts of word of mouth. People who rate you 7 to 8 are gonna do twice that amount. People who rate you 9 are gonna do twice that amount, and people who rate you 10 are gonna do twice what the 9s do in terms of word of mouth. And so, exponential value creation there, and it's a quick way to get a sense of how well are we delivering, significant, meaningful, differentiated value to the clients, and to do it quick. The other thing I'd say is, it seems like every startup especially does cohort analysis on just like, okay, these are the people we acquired in this week or month, how many continue to stay active over time? And every company that gets further along, is successful enough to get further along in their journey and really understand what's going on with users, okay, that might be one of the metrics that they look at, but then they're like, okay, what are the stages of the customer journey? And what percentage of our customers are we getting to get to this usage of the app and this type of usage, this feature usage of the app, this value proposition in the app? And so you basically map, an ideal customer they're going to start with this, and then they're going to leverage this feature or this benefit, and then at some point they'll move on to this one. And you're mapping what percentage of our customers are we able to move through that flow. And that's what I think the more sophisticated organizations are able to do, is then drive that kind of not just retention, but adoption of value creating activities within what you're delivering.
Yeah, and I think in B2C is exactly how you described. Well, in B2B, it's for us also a bit kind of a concept of upselling, because we launch additional products. How many of the clients say, okay, I want more of your products, I upsell to the next module or part of the product. So it might be a bit more obvious, but in B2C, I think it's extremely important as well. And you see so many products where people use the one first core feature and then don't even know what is around. And this is exactly what you said, like, a good product market fit, or product market fit means also like not just like you, or let's say like this, you constantly struggle to reach product market fit with every additional product you add to your service. And you always have to again and again prove it. Of course, at some point you have your core service has an initial product market fit and say, okay, there's some people who pay for it, but then it's a constant struggle because you continuously develop further.
But in that sense, I think you could treat especially in consumer products, you could treat each new feature as a product in and of itself in that regard of, are you getting product market fit on that feature that you've just implemented? Because if not, you're actually distracting probably from the overall value proposition.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's often underestimated that you think clearly about how do I measure the success of every feature I launch. So there's very small features, we might not measure it, but if they're bigger features, you say, okay, how do I measure the success of this? And I think many people don't think about this, that is a very important product work, and then measure it. And then that, again, for that feature, you might want to consider quantitative and qualitative input. And I think Miro does a very good job in after using a feature, they asked me, hey, how easy was it for you to do, I don't know, I share your account with, or invite someone to your account. So they ask even in-app specific ratings for specific features I've used and gather feedback, not just like, did I do it or not, but how easy, how much did I like it? I think that's a smart way to also do it for some key interactions.
Cool. Guys, both of you mentioned NPS. I have a question on this, and I like what Jared said. You mentioned it, that it's benchmarkable. It's Marcus, you said it's easy to ask. I think those are the advantages of the methodology. What I saw on the hindsight as well is that, okay, I got a number. What do I do with it? How do you turn? What's your experience in turning an NPS score into action of what I actually do in product? How do I tweak features?
Let me paint two extremes here. One happened today. I'm on the board of a company. Board's been asking the company for quite a while now to start measuring NPS. They finally came to the board meeting with their first NPS score for their B2B product or service, really, and it was 73. 73. That's insanely high. Let's be frank. That's insanely high. That could mean you have 75% promoters, people who rate you, 9 and 10 basically. You could have 25% who are kind of like, oh, I like it quite a bit, but 7, 8, and then 2% who are detractors, and that's how you end up with a 73 score. And we're like, I think it's time to raise prices. And then the CFO goes, you know what? Could we just start by having sales stop discounting? Like that would be a great place to start. Could we just start by like not allowing any more discounting? I'm like, yeah, that's probably a pretty good place to start. So that's one extreme on the high end. And on the low end, look, in a B2B environment, if you're under 20, that's not working. Like fundamentally, that is a recipe for failure. And basically, you should not be continuing to drive effort in sales and marketing to sell more and more of that. You should be putting those resources towards figuring out how to deliver a better value to the client, because otherwise you'll be wasting sales and marketing dollars because you won't get the retention, you won't get the benefits on the other end at the end of the day. So I'd say those are a couple of examples. Certainly B2C is a little bit different, but maybe I'll let Marcus chime in with his experience there.
I agree. There's I think one thing that is important, the NPS or Net Promoter Score is not the silver bullet. You should not blindly rely on it. There's like a lot of things. It's an indicator that is a very, as you said, measurable, easy to use indicator. And I think it's important to measure it over time, like once a quarter or so, and see how it changes, because that change could also is an interesting, again, fact. And I think with the question, you combine also always an open question, say, hey, why? Give us some arguments, and learn. Like that qualitative information is also very valuable to read through that and say, okay, what are the reasons why people like it or do not like it, and analyze that deeper. I think this is also something that is helpful in itself. And then I think when you're in B2B, it's also good to take all that feedback and use it both in product and sales, so product to develop further, but okay, who are my customers who can maybe upsell to something, or make them a lighthouse customer, make a case study with them because they're so excited about my product. So I think it's important sales information that I would keep in the CRM, customer relationship management software, to also have always an eye on that. And I think when you're in B2B, it's also interesting to measure different users from an organization. We've just did our first NPS survey, and we had in one organization, one person with 10 and one with 7, for example. So that's also interesting information to see how different people experience it in the organization, and map that back to your persona.
Yeah, different roles in a customer organization can evaluate you very differently, and it's really valuable to understand that. The other thing I'd say is segmenting customer types: enterprise versus mid-market versus SMB, one geographic market, one country versus another country, one channel partner versus another channel partner. There's always ways that you can segment this, even if it's just 2 segments. You could end up getting a lot of value by contrasting the score differences. And then to Marcus's point, adding the little qualitative aspect of why did you score this way can be really revealing at times.
Cool, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about churn as well. Like it happens, it's inevitable. In your experience, what are some good proxies? And let's stick to Marcus. I think you mentioned leading indicators in the beginning of the session. What are some like good KPIs and indicators that tell you like, beware, you're having a problem with this customer? This is question number 1. Question: what can you do if you see a customer going down the path of churning, but the customer hasn't churned?
Yeah, that's again a bit of a different thing in B2B and B2C, trying to give examples for both. So first, I think that general retention metrics are a good indicator. If you see people like fall out of certain patterns, or like we talked previously about getting people in better groups of usage, and say, okay, make them regularly active. So if vice versa, if they start dropping out of these groups, it might be whatever seasonal effects or so. There might be effects that impact this. But this is, again, something that is very different from company to company. You need to study this. You need to kind of learn what kind of early indicators do you see. And I think, for example, churn interviews can be helpful to detect certain things. Like once someone churned, interview them, understand. Like it's not easy to get them interviewed. Many people don't want to talk with you anymore once they churn. But it's a kind of invest money into this. Give them 150 euro Amazon voucher if they talk to you, or even more, to learn, okay, why have they been disappointed? And then say, look at some examples of when did you see kind of a breaking point? What was their experience that maybe triggered that? To learn a little bit about like what are patterns you can look at to identify, to say churn. And then on the B2B side, I think the bigger difference is how you react on it. Of course, in B2B, you might send your account manager or customer success manager, reach out, have a conversation. Depends, of course, on the revenue side, contract size that you have. For smaller contracts, it might not make sense. But for big contracts, you can like manage that by person. While in B2C, that's harder. Of course, like in N26, we cannot run behind every customer and say, is that like, can we reactivate them? Of course, you at some point you set up, even we have set up in N26 special email reactivation campaigns to try to bring back users into certain activity groups. But we also understood that there are some user groups, and there we again with the segmenting. Some segments you may want them to even churn because it might be too expensive or hard to keep them. So then you need to admit that mistake of having acquired the wrong user. Don't keep every user for any price. Sure. So right now we have that fact. We have onboarded a couple of what we call C customers for our product, and because they are nice, they were giving us good feedback, but just realized we should not invest too much time and energy in them. It's like we better focus on the A and AAA clients. If they use a product, it's fine. But so again, it's very important to identify this and don't make the mistake on the sales and marketing front.
I would just add a few things I've seen is slower usage. So basically, how many reports a week are they running in your analytics product or platform? How often are they logging in? How many times a day? How many times a week? How long are their usage sessions? Are they sharing, from the application? On the consumer side, Receipt Hog I mentioned earlier of taking pictures of receipts. We were getting averaging 5.5 trips a week. All of a sudden this week there was only 3. Okay, that might be a sign. Okay, they could be traveling, but that could be also that they're just forgetting or not seeing the value as much anymore. And so you might do some alerting, some triggering, some notifications, some other things to make sure they get the value. So I think there's a lot of different ways to potentially understand if a customer is at risk of churning, because you'll just see behavioral differences from one week to the next, from 1 month to the next. And it should be an alert for somebody to do some kind of reach out, whether it's automated or personal.
And I think maybe to summarize here or add a point, in B2B, it might be really individual clients that you look at, while in B2C, it's segments. Say, here is a segment that stopped using this thing in the last month or whatever. And then you need to think, what do I do with the segment? Does it make sense to retarget them, to reach out, to do some actions? So identifying this is important. And then, as I mentioned, it's very important to learn about the churn reasons, because that is the best way to prevent it. It's like learning that it never gets to that point.
I'm really interested in both of you mentioned reactivating, right? Reaching out, doing something. Do you have an anecdote or like a successful story or initiative you had in any of your companies that you could share as like an inspiration of what you do if you notice like there's a customer segment in B2C or there's an important customer in B2B that looks like it's going to churn?
So in Receipt Hog, one example was the most common day for people to upload receipts was Sunday. And so if we saw a user was typically uploading every other day or something like that, but all of a sudden it had been 4 days or more where they hadn't uploaded a receipt, taken a picture of a shopping receipt, then we would trigger a notification on Sunday, because Sunday they were most likely to be downtime. They're basically, they're not running the kids to school, they're not at work, they're in a relaxed state, they're not rushed. We'd trigger a notification, say, hey, don't forget to earn for your receipts. And guess what? People who got notified all of a sudden were like, oh yeah, and they'd go, reach into their purse or into their wallet, and they'd take a bunch of pictures of receipts. And the people who didn't get those notifications didn't. And literally that little trigger made a huge difference, not only in that moment, but in kind of continuously reminding customers the value they get from using your service, and reminding them to do it in a place and time and manner that actually is convenient for them.
I like that story. It's really cool. So let me give you again an example from the N26 time, because it was special in the sense that the base product used to be free, or still the core product is free. So it's not even so easy to say when does a customer actually churn. Of course, like in particular, if they're not really regular active, but use a bank account from time to time as their second or third account. So because they don't really cancel the account if they don't have to pay. So what we always tried is with big, important new products or features we launched, try to kind of make that a reason for them to come back. We've listened, like some said, I signed up and I was a bit disappointed because I don't know, there is no savings feature, or I cannot share my accounts with someone, or you don't do multi transactions, foreign currency transactions or so. So that could even mean running retargeting marketing campaigns on customers that you act on your own audience, because they might not check your emails anymore. So that could be, and I think we have used that in combination with marketing a few times quite successfully in reactivating or bringing user back or activating them at a later point once the product was more mature. And this can be also a type of a good chance that you use new product launches or features to try to show them, hey, the product changed, we listened to you, we're better now, give it a try again.
That works in B2B as well, from my experience. Done a lot of user reactivation and client reactivation based on new features, new capabilities that weren't available previously, and therefore maybe we fell short as a company or as a product in delivering on what that client wanted. But all of a sudden, when we could add this new capability, they were ready to re-engage.
Yeah, and to be honest, we haven't done a great job at N26 in the early days to really tell our audience about our products. We did a release once, and then if you missed that, like by now that changed it, they build a team around this. But I think many companies really underestimate this, of how important it is to sell to your existing audience, of how and what you have improved. It's probably equally important to sell to completely new audiences.
We made the same mistake at what's now known as Numerator, which is data and insights on consumer behavior. We do a product announcement when the product would come out, and that might be it. And if somebody missed it, then they just wouldn't know it's there and available. So one of the ways that we solved for that was, as clients were running reports, there's always 5-10 seconds of report runtime, even for the fastest reports in this case. Well, instead of showing something just spiraling, we would pop up. By the way, did you know you can now do X, Y, and Z? Click here to find out more. Click here to give it a try. And that's a way that we continuously made sure that the different ways we could deliver value to that client, or new features that we had released, were actually getting in front of the people who could use them in a moment where they could get value.
Super smart thing to do, and very good example. I have a few questions from the audience, and we have like 7 minutes left, and I want to make sure I'm not the only one asking questions here, but I do give the stage to our active audience members. And the first question is, I'm going to read it out to you. So first of all, great conversation. I'm working at a company that has a mature product, but it does take time to get people to do their first transactions. And what tactics or research would you recommend to understand or encourage people to get over that barrier more quickly?
So I'll jump in. I'd say the first thing is figure out what is absolutely critically necessary for them to do or go through before they can complete that transaction. So in other words, do you really need to ask them all 5 of these information profile questions, or could one do? Do you have to go through a full formal account setup, or could you create a temporary account code behind the scenes to allow this first engagement to go through? Like literally, what is the absolute minimum number of hoops or steps or things that they have to go through in order to achieve that? So that's one. And then 2, if for some reason it has to be longer, of really helping them understand, they're almost there, and here's what they're going to get when they get there. So there's little kind of cookie crumbs along the way that are leading them to this exciting, I see another crumb, and I see another crumb. There's got to be a cookie coming. There's got to be something good coming here if I reach down and pick this up and do this little work that they're asking me to do to get to this point of my first transaction in the case of the person who wrote in. So I think you have to make it feel to the customer like they're almost there and they're about to get some kind of real reward if they keep with it.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's really analyzing A, what's absolutely necessary, and B, what are possible misunderstandings in this journey to that point. So talk to users who went through that journey, and ask them for every single step, what did you feel at this stage? Like what were you scared about? Like what were unsure about? Like talk to someone who recently went through that. And oftentimes changing a bit of the wording or the copy and saying, okay, make it more clear for them. So that is one way to make basically an interview with users who just recently went through and like understand each step. What did you feel? What was unclear? And vice versa, talk to you, like observe users who currently go through that journey, observe them, what they do, and then interview them afterwards. It's a bit harder to get that set up, but I think it can be very rewarding. And it can also be in demo setting when you invite someone, say, hey, click it through, look what they do, ask them at every step, what would you expect to happen next? So I think really optimizing this journey is very important.
Cool. I have a question. We talked a lot about NPS. Oops, we lost Jared. I hope we can make it. Oh, it's back. Good. Now, okay, all right. So the question is about NPS. That there have been like many UX research subject matter experts that have been speaking very passionately on the disadvantages of NPS. So Jared, we're talking about like the disadvantages of NPS. There's a lot of discussion around that it's not really a good indicator of customer loyalty. What are your thoughts around that? Critiques NPS not being a good predictor of loyalty.
Well, what are we trying to predict really with it? So fundamentally, it's a question of how likely are you to recommend, and so that should correlate with loyalty, but that's not actually what it's measuring, right? It's measuring whether or not you see value in the service that someone else you think is in the same shoes could get value from. And so I think that's one. Two, if UX research is finding that, I don't think NPS is a great measure for user experience research. I think it's fundamentally about the core value proposition of the service being delivered, which is factoring in price and level of effort and competing alternatives, other things. It's much broader than UX. And so, I think it's also not measuring necessarily how strong the UX side of things is. So understand what it's measuring, but I think there's a lot of evidence out there, including some recent ones. There was a recent interview from a well-regarded head of product at a large company on Lenny's podcast, for example, where he was talking about their findings with NPS and how they could tie it back to very specific ongoing behaviors and word of mouth and driving word of mouth for their platform, which was key to their growth. And so I just think there's too many examples where it's demonstrated that it actually works well. I studied 25,000 consumer goods brands over 5 years, tracked NPSs relative to repeat purchase behaviors and brand growth over time and retention. And I can tell you there's something there.
I can only re-emphasize the point of don't trust only the NPS. It's one metric. And as Jared said, it measures a specific thing. So it's a combination of things you need. And there's not the one metric that predicts everything. I think the Jean Ellis score is an even better one, in my opinion, in overall user loyalty and how much someone loves the product, more really product specific. But the truth is look at hard data, retention, and so on. So don't expect too much from the NPS score. But it's still, it's a meaningful KPI in a mix of other KPIs.
Okay, I have we're out of time. I have a last question, and I'd like to throw it 30 seconds. Okay, just whatever comes to your mind, throw it out there. And the question is, there are people who never really adopt the product, right? They sign up, but then they immediately churn, so to say. And then the question is, what do you do with these kind of customers? And Maria is writing that currently she sees companies only sending out emails and trying to turn these customers into active customers. So very quick, rapid round. What do you do with these customers? They signed up, but they're not adopting.
Study their channel, where are they coming from? Try very hard to talk to some of them, understand why. I think that's essential.
Yep, I agree. I think there's a difference between marketing-based reactivation, which is what this person, Maria, writing in, is seeing and experiencing, versus pick a handful, interview and understand what's going on, and use that to drive changes to your actual product experience. That's where you're going to make the difference on the thousands of people who are going to have that potential to churn in the future.
Yeah, and understand, are they coming organically, or is this like a shitty campaign that ran, that marketing ran?
Guys, thanks so much. We could continue this discussion eternally. It's getting late for both of you. I really appreciate that you joined me. Awesome stories. I'm eternally grateful, and I hope to see you around.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Cheers all.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Okay, we have one more session to go. The conversations are brilliant, and if you ask us how we know it, it's because everyone is staying in. We've done 6 panels so far, and everyone is in the audience is staying in. Thank you so much for all the questions. We are about to start our final session, and that is about the after product market fit life. How do you stay in fit? How do you make sure that your product is still relevant to your audience through research? We're going to welcome our panelists in a second. But before that, what I would love to say, and we've said it throughout the sessions here today, if you'd like to reach out to Airtime to speak with Akos, myself, Martin, you have the calendar invite in the chat. So feel free to grab a time with Akos, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. With that being said, super excited to welcome our panelists for our last session today. Akos, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks a lot. And this is the biggest panel that we have, and I'm so happy to see all of you here. It's a pleasure to talk again. And the topic that I brought to you, before we jump into that, there are the rules of the game. Very simple. I prepared a few questions. I'm gonna throw these questions at various people here in the panel. I'm gonna rotate that so it's random. And what I would urge you to do is, if one of you said something interesting, reflect on what that other person said, and let's turn this into a discussion, okay? And build on each other's argument. At the end of the panel, I'm going to squeeze in some time for questions from the audience to make sure that it's also dialogue with all the attendees, and not just we're up on the stage discussing amongst ourselves. So that's the admin part. Let's get started. The topic is beyond product market fit, better measures of success in today's environment. And I picked this topic because the way I see it, product market fit is the traditional way of measuring if a startup is successful. It is typically associated with some phenomenon like exponential growth at very low marketing cost, where a company can grow its customer base through word of mouth. But at the same time, what I also observe from my seat as an early stage founder is that the expectations of investors shifted from growth to more like capital efficiency and profitability. And I'd like to investigate with you how this shift in terms of investor mindset comes together with the traditional measurement of being a successful startup. So the first question is, how do you actually define product market fit? And I'd like to send this question to Guy, the first person.
Thank you, Akos. Well, product market fit has many definitions, but I like to look at the following. First, people are willing to pay for what you sell them. But more than that, they're actually using the product in the way that you intend it to be. So it's not enough that they're willing to pay. They're actually using the product in the way that you wanted them to use the product. You can go on with that to the way they refer other users to use that product. But the main two criteria is the one that I've set, in my opinion.
Any of you guys want to add something to that?
Well, maybe to add, I think a lot of people talk about all the different definitions of product market fit. I actually think it's very simple. And that's also why I think the definitions are misleading. I think you know when there's product market fit. It's that simple. You just know, because there's going to be a massively accelerating interest, customers, and you're really, really struggling to just keep up. And that's how I look at it. You know, because the moment you ask yourself, do I really have product market fit? Is there a maybe? The maybe means there's no, that's not true product market fit. You're not there yet. So that's the way I like to look at it, you know, in the most simplistic form.
Elliot, you built a business.
Yeah, but Brian started speaking and then he was on mute. So I'll give Brian the benefit to start first, and then I'll promise I'll share my insight.
Okay.
I work with a lot of startups, and so I think one of the big challenges with product market fit is what are the indicators that you're moving in the right direction, right? So there's these external measures, and you're right. You kind of know when things become effortless, when sales start working, you know, when you know that your customers are satisfied. Those are really good ways of measuring and having metrics around it, you know. And so we could say that it's the inflection point between growth and scale. But I think there's several things that we can look at that lead to that. And when you're working, especially with startups, it's good to self-assess these, because if you get them all right, then you have a much higher chance of having that sense of, you know, just confidence that it's there. And so for me, it's, you know, you can start in the discovery phase. You know, do you know that it's a real problem, that the problem's acute enough that people actually want a solution? Right? As you're building it, you know, are you building something that you can validate that the solution actually meets people's needs? Right? And you can test this while you're still doing prototypes before you commit any code, right? Look at the competition, really identify where the gaps are. You know, what do you have that makes you unique? If you can't answer that question, you've got a PMF problem long before the business is released. And then, of course, you know, once you do release it, you know, testing with customers, really listening early and often to understand, you know, if they are happy and what their evolving needs are. So to me, the numerical measures are lagging indicators of product market fit. And we can assess it ahead of time by looking at things like our problem space and our customers and our product, and just constantly being in touch with people so that we have a finger on the pulse of how people are responding to our concepts.
That's a great approach. So, hi everyone. And my approach to the market fit was a bit different when I started, because I took a leap of faith. I bought a business that wasn't working that great and decided to pivot it from being an operator myself to becoming a provider. So for me to decide if to go ahead and do that, I was the first client to use the system. I was there to begin with. I had the vision on what would make it better as the user, but then that was my vision. And the conflict was, will I be able to sell it to my competitors or my friends in the business to see how it goes? And then I've never considered the freemium models or any other. For me, it was, I have to sell it at a price, and customer had to pay from day one, because we started 7.5 years ago and we're bootstrapping it all the way up until now. I've been selling since day one, and I had pre-sales ready telling me commitments, signed application forms. We'll start paying the second you launch this thing. And then it was a complete, let's say, leap of faith and going ahead all in to go ahead and do that. So I was never the traditional type of entrepreneur to do the research and raise money beforehand and then experiment after that with other people's money. It was a little bit of my money, everything I had to begin with, and then just full running into it. So I think my approach from the audience here, will be a bit different because I literally went through all the different hurdles to check the market fit and see how will I get to the additional market besides the people I knew, because as much as I think I'm well connected, the world is much bigger than that. And so I think the approach of checking if people will pay for that was the main part. Can I sell it? Will someone sign before I even launch? With just not even an MVP to start with, screenshots of what I'm planning to do. And you know I can do that because you've seen me do it before. So for us, it was that type of the investigation beforehand. And I had about 2 weeks to make a decision of a go, no go, because it was opportunity to buy something really cheap just to make it happen. So imagine it's not like months and months of thinking about it and making the decision. It was literally 14 days end to end, make the decision, put the capital and start running with it as is. So.
Amazing story. Teddy, you have a unique perspective from Heartfelt and APX. Like there's a large portfolio that you're overseeing and also very active investors. How do you see this question?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of the prior two comments. So for us, it's all about testing that minimum viable hypothesis. So when we invest, it's literally a team, pretty bad pitch deck often, and hopefully a pretty good idea. And it's really about validating that problem solution fit. First the problem, then the potential solution, and the fit over time. I think I don't really like the word product market fit because it just means way too many different things. I think it is customer love essentially, and that growing over time. And often in a market where the dynamics are fitting, that problem solution being out there and people using it more and more. I'm more of a fan of thinking about trying to identify these early signals, and it's going to be different, I think, for each type of business. Whether it is, like Riyad said, customers signing up for it in advance and saying, I want to pay for it, even though all it is pretty much a drawing in Figma at the moment. That could be a signal. The signal could be like what people said, referral rates are going through the roof. I don't have to spend anything to acquire customers. It could also be early signals of problem solution fit that we see are purposefully founders being very, very targeted to, say, a small group of beta test users, but that love and engagement is increasing week over week, day over day. And that is usually a pretty good sign that there is some problem solution fit for that initial customer segment. I think the key is then figuring out, okay, how do I go from dominating this customer segment and expanding it to others, and also extending the value that our product is creating for existing segments over time. But I think that, I really like what Brian said. I used to say when I was living in London that revenue, and this was again 10 years ago, so I think it was different times in the market, but revenue is often a lagging indicator of success. And we have to really try to figure out these early kind of momentum signals showing that customers are really loving the product and want to do more with it.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Let's look at the what I'm also interested about is the investors thinking. This is something I'm also trying to do, is trying to get my head around of how did expectations shift from in the last year. And there are a number of seed stage or Series A stage founders in the audience. And I think it would be extremely insightful to hear your thoughts of in what way are you thinking differently about these rounds, and what sort of indicators are you looking for that are different than a year ago or pre-Ukraine war? And I'm looking at the three active investors here. So one of you want to grab the mic?
Yeah, sure. I can go. I mean, look, I think the obvious start is the markets are just way tougher, right? So I think it was Y Combinator that coined the statement, "You gain market share simply by surviving." Right? That was I think they coined it last year, summer spring, and I think kind of that sets the stage, in terms of how investors, at least how we also look at the rounds. Runways are way more important. So runways used to be way shorter. Now we like to have 18 to 24 months actually runway. That's what we're looking at. It's way more important to kind of optimize for be in a sustainable spot to minimize burn, right? So it's just where previous companies we looked at, there was this insane push for growth, sometimes at very unsustainable ways. Now sustainability is a big part of how we look at it. Can a company survive if it really gets to it, can they break even? You know, is there a backup scenario? So these are all options that we're looking for. Just follow on funding, you know, the rate is way slower. We have way more time to talk to companies, which is great. I mean, let's be honest, 21 was utterly unsustainable, you know, on all fronts, I think. So we're now in a way, I think, at a great time where you know, yes, it's tougher, but I think the startups being built now, it's a massive opportunity, you know. And as an investor, we just want to make sure they can survive. You know, we can't support them all the way, and that they don't die. I mean, that's a huge element now.
I will add to that point. I think what happened to the market because of this uncertainty and difficult times, in many cases, indications we expected, let's say in round A, we will look for them already in earlier stage, in seed. We would look to have more traction, more product market fit. We would expect the founders to already gain some knowledge about the product they're working on. So round A turn to seed, round B turn to A. We look for more concrete indications, more than before.
The one thing I would add here is definitely during the first like 6 months since the market started turning a year and a half ago, it was incredibly important, and we still say this to our founders because we're first check investors, often investing before angels. So our pace, our risk appetite hasn't really changed because we can't really go earlier than 0 in terms of a company, in terms of what we're looking for. There's no real data. But in terms of helping our companies when they're preparing for their seed, Series A rounds in the past year and a half, it's really about maintaining that dialogue with those later stage investors. Later stage to us, still early stage. Because I would say a lot of these funds also did not know what they're looking for. And their LPs who said, hey, maybe we should slow down a little bit, also did not know when to slow down, to when to pick up. Should we shorten our investment cycles for our funds or speed them up? Who knows? That's why that constant dialogue was so important. I think it's still important. I think ultimately, probably we'll look back at this decade of our fund vintage and say, actually, this was for the good. And I hope other investors would agree. It sucks for those founders who are stuck. They're in that time of flux. But ultimately, I think those founders who survive will be the ones who actually build these lasting businesses. And that's kind of how, unfortunately, we have to do more with less money during this time.
So I'm gonna, Brian, please. Yes.
I just wanted to add to it from a different perspective, right? So my agency, we do the research, right? And we do the testing of products. And so I work for founders who are seeking investing. And what I've noticed in the last really year has been a shift to saying, hey, prove it, right? Like, instead of we're just going to throw money at an idea off of a Figma slide or a PowerPoint, it's like we actually want to see real indicators that you have traction, right? That these small things you're thinking about, you know, actually can lead to bigger things through time. So there's been a much bigger pressure on, in my opinion, doing things the right way, right? Which is, you know, evaluating some of the factors I talked about, as well as things like business models and marketing strategies, and creating, in a sense, like a scorecard, right? And one of my colleagues did exactly this here in San Diego, where he built, and we've been using a scorecard that essentially it's a set of metrics you can create. And a lot of them are kind of self-perceived metrics, but you can back it up with good studies that say, here's where we are as a company. And I've been asked multiple times to like write a statement that says, hey, show that we actually validated the problem. What did you do as a research team? How many people did you talk to? How much of the, you know, and I find that very encouraging, because that means that the companies that are doing this are doing their due diligence, right? So that as an investor, when you read a document like that, you're like, okay, this company's for real, right? And they're actually testing things rather than blowing smoke at my ass. Pardon my language.
Maybe to add on what Ryan was saying, is a lot of founders I talk to at the early stage, I also straight up, well, what kind of questions do you ask your customers? Or just to get a sense how they phrase it. And because so many times, you know, they're just looking and hearing the questions and thinking, okay, that's not real validation. You know, and that's really important. I mean, there's all kinds of books written about it, so we'll go into it, but just asking the right questions to your potential customers early on is absolutely crucial. not to waste time and delude yourself that you're building something that nobody needs.
Yeah, I always tell people never ask if you like the idea, because everybody likes the idea of something that has no indicator if they're actually going to use it or buy it. Right. So it's like a wasted question. There's much better questions we can be asking.
I think it was a book called The Mom Test, written by Rob Fitzpatrick. That also, very similar lines, Brian. So,
yeah.
I wanted to pass the ball to Elliot. And I'm curious, Elliot and we had a number of discussions in the past, and in one of the discussions you mentioned that you got frequently approached by investors in the past to like invest in your company and then grow faster. And I was just wondering, do you see any change since you have a profitable company? Do you see like a change in like investor behavior or interest in the company that you're building?
Actually, I'll take that and connect it to the previous question as well, because I saw the change in paradigm when I was talking to investors, let's say 6 years ago and 5 years ago, because I wasn't looking when I started the company. They were always looking at the Excel, show me like quick projections, show me how the more money we throw at it, the 10x growth that's going to come in. And I'm a bit of a pessimist. I build businesses. I've never looked at the business of building it as a startup to start raising funds for it in order to fuel it more. I build it sustainably. So in case I never get funded, which is the use case, never pursued it, then we'll manage to sustain the business. And that way they said, listen, this can't grow without big money. And I said, okay, I'll prove you wrong. Thank you for the time. I asked some questions in terms of feedback, how they saw some other parts of the industry that I was coming from the industry I was serving to begin with. But when we started, we were doing only card processing and alternative payment methods. And we scaled to banking and card issuing and really serving the full financial ecosystem on that part. That grew from, let's say, serving customers coming with a demand and building the first product with an actually paying customer, even for the development process. So for me, the growth was always coming from a paying customer, brainstorming together. I was giving away my consulting hours for free, but he was paying for the actual work being done. And I kept selling it to more clients, and everybody was benefiting from it. So when I spoke to investors at the beginning, they only want to see, okay, I don't see that as a 10x company. But then if you start comparing it to the likes of, let's say, us to ACI and Solaris Banks and other, you did see public companies, huge companies doing the same. But let's say my timing was a bit too early. Now, come 7 years later, spoke to some investors lately because we had some moves to consider, but it was more brainstorming with the investors on how they see the market now for having a sustainable company, 7.5 years in, bootstrapping all the way, literally what they're now looking for after, let's say, spending money in companies that have burned the money through and reached that, let's say, tough times that they needed to survive on that amount of money. And now suddenly the interest comes, okay, you proved yourself for 7 years, let's see what we can do together. But maybe the timing isn't right for me right now to use that capital in that way. And we're pursuing a more, let's say, creative points of financing specific products in rev share agreements and stuff like that from our clients, etc. So if I'm looking at how the investors, what I was pitching 6 or 5 years ago, and how I think the investor should look at things, a little bit more stable growth, not the 10x, but maybe 6 and 7 that we showed in our graphs. And I was more showing, let's say, steady growth through that process. Now they're coming into it, and that became the approach. Show me that you can become profitable. When will you start being profitable in the expenses? Which we were we were showing those results to begin with because I didn't have any other choice. I had to be profitable really early on. Otherwise, I'll have to put more money from, let's say, from my own pocket. And it wasn't interesting. I knew I can grow the company, even if it's a bit slower, but it's going to be steady. And we grew the team, and we grow more developers and more support, and now sales and everything else through the mix.
Thanks a lot. Awesome. Do you guys want to like anything to that, or shall we move to the next topic? We move to the next topic. Good. All right. What I'm interested in is that, like, you were also talking about revenue, guys, you too, and it's more important for investors already in the early stages. And I was wondering, what's your take on, in typical SaaS businesses, in the freemium model, it has the free package. And I think the famous example is Dropbox, where like 90% of its users are actually in the free package and only a small fraction of them generating revenue, like larger enterprise clients. How do you see this shift towards more revenue at earlier stages impacting the way early stage startups monetize and price in the SaaS vertical? And Teddy, I'm gonna throw the question to you first.
Yeah, it's actually really relevant. Because I was talking to one of your fellow founders earlier today about this same topic. Because I think there was this fear that if they started to charge and not knowing what to charge, because pricing models will take time to develop, right? As a customer, they're around seed stage, this founder. I think there's this element of like, oh, if I charge, I don't know what to charge, first of all. Second of all, I might lose some customers that right now are really, really great in terms of co-developing these first versions of the product in a pilot phase. I think even before the market turned and even now, I think it's important to test willingness to pay. And I think it depends on the type of customer, like how long the sales cycles are, who's the user / purchaser of these different customers, and the overall the value prop. But if there is a way to test it, we always recommend our founders to try it out. And it's okay if it doesn't work out. Like, it's not going to ruin the first pilot customer. There'll be more chances to bring it around, and also be a great learning for the founders to do that. I think, yes, there is a shift. We see it with our follow-on investors that we co-invest with at seed and later on, that there seems to be a bit more of an emphasis on proving this willingness to pay and figuring out potentially what the revenue model could be. But I think we all have to admit that these things will change as the product continues to iterate and as you try to find PMF. And one of the companies I was an investor in way back when when we were doing angel investments, they didn't really figure out their pricing until they got to Series B, and this was before the hype. And it was completely fine. Like, they got it wrong a few times, but they still had happy customers. Some of them still sticking around till today. So yeah, I would say that's my thought on that one.
If I can chip in. So luckily enough, I'm a mentor for Guy in Techstars. That's how I met you guys. And I love the mentor madness sessions. For me, it's like a day off. I can brainstorm with a bunch of, let's say, really creative entrepreneurs. And now the pricing always comes in. If I look from the last 2 rounds that we did, I think with the majority of them, we were brainstorming problems. That's what I like to do in those 15 minutes. And the majority of them was looking at pricing. And some of the groups were focused on a product that was more enterprise level. They were looking at long sales cycles, and now it becomes a lot more problematic at sorts. And we managed to brainstorm a lighter product, which will be for the smaller SMBs, and that part, which the sales cycle is pretty much self-service for services that they will never consume or gut, because the companies are focusing on large enterprises, huge tickets for every sale, and that part, which will become problematic. So suddenly you see from a huge ticket sale to something on self-service with a lighter version of it that they've never thought of doing. And we'll see that in the market. A lot of the big companies are actually starting to introduce those lighter models, not going all the way extreme to the freemiums, but rather giving something that the smaller company will start consuming, something that they've never thought of charging, when for them the investment in terms of shifting the product isn't that large, because it's a lighter version of what they built. It's kind of a MVP that they can show even the enterprise client. Look, I have a lot of small clients that using the light. You can use the more advanced software. It's no installation and so on to start running with it. Some actually from the companies that I've, let's say, worked with over the years, shifted of not even doing enterprise and just focus on that lighter, because then the multipliers of the amount of, let's say, growth they got for these kind of services actually picked up really nicely and decided to focus just on that. And maybe once a year they do an enterprise sale rather than focus on that. And I think that's where we're going to see people, as Jack Dorsey said, keep the number of features to, let's say, to perfect, and every feature perfect on that part, even though I'm more of the LinkedIn founder approach of that. If you launch something that you're proud of, you launch too late. So, but it's a matter of, it's pretty much right now, let's take part of what Jack says and let's say shifts, let's say deliver something which is smaller in terms of your vision of where you want it to go. See that the people are willing to pay even a smaller amount of it, and slowly start adding the add-ons and increasing the price based on it. But don't keep it complex. Don't start charging per feature, because you'll never be able to sustain that account, let's say the accounts part of it. You'll never be able to charge properly. You have to invest a lot of money in calculating how much money you need to charge the client. So listen, I'm expanding the product. This feature will cost a bit extra. The new price for the service is $5 extra, $20 extra, and so on, until you get to the package you feel complete with. When I launched, I had a pricing that I had set in mind that I wasn't overly expensive as to my competitors. I had a lot more functionality to start it because, as I said, I bought at base of a company and shifted what the company was doing to something else. But let's say I was pretty set on what I was delivering. I knew I was launching, let's say, a very sustainable working, I'll call it beta because I pivoted the offering, but I've never negotiated the price. My pricing is on the website till today. And then whenever I did a redesign or something new, we broke things apart and there's another plan. The old clients kept their own pricing. If they want to use those things, we shift to a new pricing model, but then later shift all of them and close the old program. And people focus on, let's try to get growth at any cost. And then worst case, we'll think about something later. And now if you start thinking about it as a business rather than just as a startup, that changes it. And the discussions with the startup, Nikos can testify to that. We talked about it a lot even after the program. It's something different because everybody was talking about only the pitches, reaching investors, etc. And suddenly you're thinking about, let's start getting paying customers and see how they go rather than just building the pitch deck throughout the process.
Brian, yes, I wanted to ask you, and I'd like you to reflect on what Iliad said, but please also include, you must have had some engagements with your clients around researching pricing and how to price, and I'd be super interested in what you found for earlier stage companies when they introduce their first prices or as they refine their initial pricing.
Yeah, I think, I can speak really about the last 3 or 4 clients that I've had, and I've seen a shift, right, and different approaches. I'll say from an end user perspective, first of all, I'm a huge fan of freemiums because I love trying out new software, and that gives me an opportunity to see if I like something, but I have an expectation that I'm going to be paying for it if I like it. So just from a user perspective, I think it really helps with a go-to-market strategy if you can offer a freemium model to people. However, at the same time, just to have a freemium and say, justify to your investors that, oh, well, we're just doing this to get a number of people with traction, right? I feel that that's a bit of a cop-out, or it might be used as an excuse when you don't actually have any indicators of product market fit. So if you're going to use the freemium model, there also needs to be a premium model. And what I see is there's more of an emphasis on demonstrating a conversion rate up. So it's like, okay, you can have a freemium model, and that's a great model for attracting new people, depending on the type of product that you have, of course. But it can't just be that. It can't be like, oh, well, we're going to do this, and then later we're going to add the premium model. There needs to be some metric that shows that you are getting a shift in adoption. And that's one approach I've seen. Is the other one, though, is, really what you were talking about, Iliad, which is the sense of don't start at all with the freemium. Start with very small ways of making money on things that deliver value to people, and create a pricing package around those. It's just enough to get the business going, like just enough to take your part-time workers and make a couple full-times, or hire that next person that you need, right, to help the company grow. And have the capacity then to add on more features that add more value. And then as you add each unit, it's kind of like Legos, right? As you add each unit, you create either new pricing models, or I really liked what you said with variant pricing models, in the sense that, hey, if you want to stick with what you've been doing and this is your feature set, by all means, stick with that, right? But if you want to take advantage of these new things that we've been building, then it's a different price package. That to me feels very transparent, between the company and the customers. And a lot of customers are pretty savvy these days, right? So they will be looking at how you speak to them, and they are very aware of tricks. And so if you're just very transparent, then I think that works with early stage companies. And so again, I'm a big fan of what we call value co-creation, which is where the company is in regular communication with the customers, not only to determine, things like product market fit and what should we build next, but just to establish a relationship with them. And if I'll tell a story here to end up, Nike did this a long time ago. And, they opened up and said, hey, we're going to have a portal where customers can start designing their own shoes. Now, I think we all know how massively successful that was, right? So I look at that, and to me, that's a golden standard that I really advocate with my clients.
I think Lego has that, by the way, as well. That people can design Legos and send in, the plans for that, and if they're good enough, it's picked up by Lego itself. So they let their own customers co-create a product for them. Cool. Guy, Mike, do you guys have anything to add to this topic?
Well, much has been said about the freemium model. In general sense, if you go freemium, you need to have a clear understanding that you will find a way how to monetize it. Freemium model in our current, I assume, climate is not sustainable for the long run, and you need to find ways to monetize. That's my 1 cent to add, which was said already by several people here.
Yeah, I'm also not going to repeat. I think it's been said. I think in open source we face a similar problem, and I just love founders who deeply think about this. You know, so it's great. I mean, similar to what Brian said, I love freemium, but I just want to invest in founders who really deeply think about this and know what they want to monetize. And that can change, right? I mean, all this stuff changes all the time, but that's important to me. So like not to look at founders who just, let's start free and we'll see where it goes.
I'll add something because Brian brought up something that's really important. It's difficult for a founder that starts as a bootstrap company to think about what to focus on next in terms of development, and not just to launch, but rather what will be the next feature I'll put my, let's say, emphasis on, and what I'll develop next. And I think there's always the conflict of, let's say, talking to a new potential client. He says, you don't have this feature. If you build it, I'll come in and I'll sign up. And then what happens? Young founders develop that thing, nobody uses it, and that client disappears, never respond on that part. And for us, we always, even the beginning, but we keep sticking to it now, we love those kind of discussion, because what we did, we built up the hype for the customer, thinking that, of course, we're going to run and do it. And then we brainstorm and get more features and more ideas on it. And he got excited. And then I pushed the brakes and said, it's fantastic, but we only develop new features for paying customers, and then we can participate with you in the development. And then you see if he's actually serious, and then moving on to become a customer, if it makes sense to even develop it, because he's putting money out of pocket to actually pay and, let's say, contribute to the cost of developing that feature with you together. Because he understands that the value will come in, you take him seriously, but only if you do it for paying customers. Meaning you as a company will always stay focused on delivering products that your clients will actually use, and not running around with prioritizing something else just to get the next client. You're showing him that you're only investing in paying customers rather than chasing the next one. And once he signed the contract, paid you the setup, he's no longer relevant. He's just another client in the mix rather than being the most important one. I'm not chasing leads and getting them excited. I'm making my clients happy, and by that getting them to refer me to their clients and testify that they're happy, and so on and so forth.
Thanks, guys. Awesome thoughts and stories shared here. There's an anecdote I wanted to tell you. A friend of mine with his wife came over to our place a couple of weeks ago, and he's a founder. He had a couple of convertible rounds, raised about 400K, and recently, what he decided to do is to turn his business on profitable path. And now his company is profitable. And now he's actually thinking of how to get rid of it's a nasty word, but like how to negotiate with convertible loan holders to change the game. Because when they invested, they were investing in a 10x story. But then he's saying, I have a good business here. I make enough money. I have 10 employees, it works fine. And I was just wondering, is this in a single anecdote, or do you see any trend among founders that because of increased expectations, if they have the possibility to turn profitable, they may take another course, which is not the classic VC high growth?
I actually, maybe to comment, I think founders in general maybe think way too quickly about a venture where it shouldn't be a venture case at all. And in fact, I think you can earn so much money building a great lifestyle business, and I think that's often overlooked. So first of all, oftentimes the market is simply not there. It's not a venture case, so we shouldn't invest. But even if it is, the question is, do you really want it? And that's a big question, because I mean, with investments, there comes expectations, and that's not for everyone. So I think that's an important question to ask yourself. I mean, first of all, is it a venture case? Is the market big enough? And the second, do you want it? And again, you can build amazing lifestyle business. If you make a couple of million, and you pay yourself out every year, and you grow sustainably, great. With a small team. I mean, do you really need to build $1 billion company? So I think that question should be asked more often, and also whether it should be venture case at all.
That's a very good point. Teddy, do you see, like, again, going back to the large portfolio of APX and the Heartfelt, you must have seen a number of trajectories that your startup companies went. What's your take on this?
Yeah, we had actually 2 companies in the APX portfolio this year where the founders decided to leave the venture path. I think when there's alignment, it's awesome. When the founders like, look, we are breaking even or soon to break even, and we don't want to be on the venture path anymore, and they communicate that well to their existing investors, I think that's completely fine. We'll figure out a way if we can to make money. If not, then the founders are on their way to create a lifestyle business. I guess the other situation, the other company, was a bit different because it would take more time, more capital to become profitable, more runway. And the founders didn't want to go on the venture path, but there's still promise. And they were actually getting inbound from investors, even in this climate, saying, why are you not going out? Because the growth was good, engagement was good, and there was a chance to get to the next stage, to Series A. But the founders were done with it. And they communicate that too, in a nice way. And in that way, actually worked with the investors to engineer an exit for them. They said, I don't want to be on my own venture path. I want to work within a larger company. So let's figure out a way to make this happen. And I think both are fine. And I think that's also part of an investor's job, is to figure out, hopefully before the investment is made, whether this will continue on the venture path. But if it, for whatever reason, doesn't continue, and for us, especially the early stages, it's more driven by the founders, unless the business is not proceeding in that direction, then I think it's fine to have that conversation with the investors and figure it out. Because it's the founders' business. The investors are just there to be cheerleaders and open a few doors and maybe share some stories amongst themselves in the portfolio, but really comes down to where the founders want to go.
Cool. The rest of you guys, Guy, do you have maybe a perspective of that? You've been a founder, you created a number and built a number of startups. You've been an investor in multiple, so you've been in both seats. How do you see this?
I think that the sentence, you don't need to build $1 billion company to be successful or happy or satisfied with your creation, is the best conclusion. I agree with that. I support that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Guys, last question. And I know in life there are 2 things for certain. I know that's what they say: taxes and death. But I still like your sentiment and thoughts of how long do you think this current market will last in terms of investor startup dynamics? Because from my perspective, it seems like we're on a sinus curve, which used to be on a very high wave for founders, and now it's plunging very deep. And I'm curious how you see this curve developing moving on. And yes,
no one takes it all.
It's the hot potato.
I can take it,
but I'm still curious.
Look, I think the problems are fundamental. For 10 years, interest rates have been close to zero. There's been a party like there's no tomorrow, and on top of it, went through Corona, and that really impacted global supply chain. And now we have a war situation in Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of things happening, right? I think when we start looking at macro, I've heard, at least a little bit early in the year, a lot of sentiment. Oh, soft landing and things are going to be way better Q4 and next year. And honestly, I don't buy it. So my personal opinion is that we're in it for a bit. Again, that's just my opinion. I think next year is still going to be tough. I think there's a chance that also when you look at public markets, that things may go south again. I don't know, but that's definitely an option. So, I would just prepare for sustainability. Just accept what it is right now, hope for the best, and prepare for the worst, and be prepared to sit it out. However long it lasts. But I do think it's gonna last for a bit. That's my opinion.
Brian, how do you see it from with the founders and startups that you're working with? What is their expectation or thoughts on this?
I can't speak for all founders, but I know that with the people that I work with, they're not concerned. There's this idea that the problems that we're solving aren't going anywhere. The opportunities that exist aren't really being seized by companies. So with the people I'm working with, I really feel that there's a niche, right? One of them is more so than the other, but social conditions around some of these are not changing anytime soon. And in fact, they're getting worse. And so we don't need to wait, for the investment market to change. I think that we'll either figure it out bootstrapping it, or we'll get some people that believe in it and give us just enough to get the MVP off the ground. And I'm pretty confident that once it's in people's hands, in both cases, that we're going to start to see customer love and we're going to start to see adoption. And so to me, I think the big thing is making sure that the founder isn't putting himself upside down in terms of money. Like, let's say that this takes us 2 years to get it off the ground instead of 6 months. Can you still pay your bills? Right. So some of the founders I work with, they have another company, right? And that pays their bills while they build the new one. And so they have to just maintain that balance. But I don't see any of them being like, oh, I'm going all in on this, and I'm going to go get venture capital and we're going to be successful. They're not taking it that way. And, and I think that's a smart strategy. And I think that I live in San Diego, and I think that attitude and that climate is prevalent here. People are being much more diligent, much more cautious, much more methodical. And it was really different a couple of years ago.
And maybe just one thing to add to what Brian said. I think the opportunities for automation, hence efficiency, and hence being more cost efficient for companies are incredible right now, given where technology is and how fast it's growing. Right, so there's an immense amount of opportunities for startups.
I think in a word, at least from what we see from our end, the same as Brian sees that with his customers, people are more inclined to rent it rather than to build it. As is to before they raised the funds, they were building it and say, why would I rent from someone, let's say, as a platform, and now they have the opportunity, says, listen, I need to be more cash efficient, so let's rent out, see if it works, and then if we manage to raise the funds and we see the clients, then maybe we'll build it afterwards, and then kind of grow out of it at that stage. At the end, nobody grows out of it, and they're enjoying it and investing it in other places. But I do see a lot of more people discuss with me like 2 years ago and saying, listen, I prefer to build it myself rather than to be owned by someone like myself as a platform, and everything is built on top of the platform, which will be difficult to migrate. Suddenly there's much more, willingness to go into that adventure that way, because it costs them significantly less money to start. And then they say, let's experiment. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, I didn't invest that much money. I didn't burn all my savings in order to do that. So they launch much faster on that, which for me, it's great. More customers for us coming in. But we do see a better willingness to do that.
I would add to it, I wouldn't wait to see when the wave is changing. I say don't be dependent on the wave. Build your startup, build your venture in a way that you can do it without the VC. You will find a way to do it. If you do well, the VC will come after you regardless, whether it's a wave or not wave.
Awesome. Teddy, you get the final word.
The final word. I mean, I don't speak words of wisdom. I mean, I have a personal view. I think when the market will turn, but let's see. Who knows? If I knew, then I wouldn't be sitting here. Probably I was sitting on a beach. Yeah, I think for me, the founders should always be resilient. We always talk about resilience, right, as founders, and being resilient is being mindful of the times we're in and what solution you're really truly building in terms of the problem you're solving. And the problem the solution fit will adapt to the market environment. And if you're truly a founder who's targeting, hey, I want to make my customers really happy and I want to build a enduring and category defining business, then they're going to be resilient and adapt to the conditions to do that. Whether it means shifting in terms of how I do get my customers, shifting the business model itself, pivoting quickly. These are all things that I think excellent founders will do. And the founders who were successful during the hype, it's a different type of founder probably that's going to find success in this time too. But they'll still demonstrate those core qualities that at least we look for as investors. I would say most investors would look for regardless. And I think it's actually the best time to be building it right now. It's actually more reflective of reality. So for me, it's great. The past few years are crazy. And there's still plenty of dry powder out there in Europe. And yes, it's a bit slow now, but it's going to turn because the money's out there.
Thanks so much to all of you. We actually exceeded our time with the panel. I appreciate for all of you. I know it's like, it's except for Brian, it's a late hour for everyone. Iliad and Guy, especially for you. Take care, guys. It was good to see you. And everyone else. Thanks so much. And I'll wrap up the session, but feel free to step out.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Much. So for everyone else here, thanks so much for joining our summit. And as a last word, we had more than 15 amazing panelists here. If you have any questions that that popped up right now, you didn't want to put in the chat, but or maybe you're digesting it and you think about it tomorrow, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to any of the panelists on LinkedIn. Both me and they will be thrilled to discuss them. Also, if you have any questions or topics around Airtime, more than happy to bring you up to speed. I'm besides the summit, I'm running regular webinars and podcasts with renowned product thought leaders and user researchers. So I hope to see many of you in the coming weeks and coming months. And with that note, you were an amazing audience. The panelists equally awesome, and I'm grateful I could host this event with all of you, and hope to see you around. Take care, everyone. Ciao, ciao.